Just a little bit of why I am excited to have this guest on. Then I'm going to bring Jason up. Jason and I do a once a month podcast. I met Jason through another podcast, Dayfire, with me and Dawson Wheeler. We talk about adventures in the great outdoors. But Jason is a business owner, but he also is he owns a jiu-jitsu school and big into MMA. And I didn't know this when we started talking, but he also had a MMA podcast back in the day. That's how we like to say it, back in the day. And so it just kind of naturally, I said, man, we got to start getting every now and then, get a guest on to talk about something that's in your wheelhouse. And this is in his wheelhouse. I am a guy, sometimes when I can't sleep, I go down rabbit holes on the internet. And for months and months now, I've been going down this rabbit hole with this guest I'm getting ready to bring on, Rob Ingram. He owns and runs and provides content for McDojoLife. And I started going down this rabbit hole, and I just threw it out to Jason one day. I said, Jason, we got to get this guy on because you speak jiu-jitsu and MMA. I know enough about it to be dangerous. And I'm a huge fan. And he goes, let's try it. Why not? And what do you know? What do you think about that, Jason? You sent the message out there. I followed up. Bam, baby. We got us a guest.
Yeah, man. Rob was fired up to come on and do it. So
yeah.
His like Instagram, I'm more on Instagram than Facebook these days, but his Instagram is literally like one of the best pages on the entire Instagram. And
I was surprised when I sent this out to people, how many people who just sent me back, I follow his stuff all the time, man.
Yep. Oh, it's great. I mean, you just see all kinds of stuff. It's the whole spectrum from, crazy weapons disarms that are probably going to get you shot to, I think it's called a screama. Hey, I'm going to touch you with my finger and you're going to fall down. And
he posted one today where it's just this. It's just this right here, man. It's just touching you, not even touching you, the no touch throw. But anyway, in case anybody's wanting to know, McDojoLife, all his links are in the description here. He basically, and I'm sure he does other stuff, we'll find out. He debunks fake jiu-jitsu, MMA instructors or martial arts instructors, shall I say, their dojos, and he does it in a very, very entertaining way. So it really doesn't matter if you're I don't really like combat sports. That's fine. Do you like good content that will make you laugh, make you smile, and comedy? God almighty.
You got to follow McDojoLife. Yeah. Even if you've never darked the door of a gym or a dojo or anything like that. It's excellent content. It's some of the best stuff on the internet.
You don't even have to be choked out in the past to watch it. Even though I like saying rear naked choke, it just makes me smile because it's rear naked choke. Hey, do me a favor real quick. We're about to bring Rob up. We got a guest. We're working on a date soon. Tell everybody the guest we got coming on. I'm pretty pumped about that.
Working on a date, but our guest for August is actually going to be the first ever lightweight champion in the history of the UFC. His name is Jens Pulver. I named my firstborn son after him. Jens is a left-hander, and he has a straight left hand that is just one of the nastiest in the history of the game, and was so exciting to watch, and obviously was one of my favorite guys. And I have a connection to him through one of my wrestling coaches that actually wrestled with Jens. Wrestled in college. He wrestled at Boise State. And
cool.
But Jens, he's agreed to come on. He's going to be our August guest. And
that's awesome.
We'll nail down the date, and I'll get that to you, but probably closer towards the end of August. But super excited about that. Lightweight champ.
Yep. All right, let's do this. Let's not waste any more time. Let's bring Rob up. Here we come, Rob. He's ready. 3, 2, 1. It's coming up. And what's up, buddy?
I exist. I'm a floating head on a screen now. That's pretty cool.
Man, let me go ahead. And I know I've been singing your praises a little bit, but I know you're busy putting stuff out there. So thanks for taking the time and jumping on the podcast, man.
No, not a problem. I gave myself 2 rules when I started the page. 1, I was going to answer every direct message, and 2, I was going to be on anyone's show who asked. That was still rules I follow today, and I always will.
You already answered one of my questions. I was going to ask, do you go through all the comments? Because you get a wide range of comments. Let's jump right in, dude. Tell everybody what the page is.
I don't go through all the comments. That would be pretty weird. I don't have the time to go through all the comments, but I do try to stay on for algorithm purposes for just a few minutes here or there throughout the day, whether I do it right at the beginning or the middle of the day or afternoon. I try to engage a little bit, but that's more to get traction. That's not, if people want to talk to me, it makes more sense for them to send me a direct message because I'll answer those. People who tag me and stuff, you should probably stop because 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to see it. And it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just because your Instagram feed, when you get notifications, cycles. So after you get so many notifications, the old stuff disappears and you don't even know that they exist. So yeah, it's just is what it is, man. I can't read everything.
Do me a favor, tell everybody, and we'll get into your history a little bit more and how you got here, but tell everybody what the page is and why you're telling us what the page is and what it's about. Go ahead and throw in there why and how it got started.
Well, so McDojoLife calls out fakes, frauds, phonies, con men, and pedophiles in the martial arts industry. And I've been doing that now for almost a decade, coming up on a decade. I started martial arts about 24 years ago. And so I had been doing it for a very long time before I began McDojoLife. McDojoLife started specifically because of a conversation that I had with a new student. I was a jiu-jitsu coach at the time. I was a blue belt. So primarily I was helping with the kids' classes and things like that. And I was the striking coach there at the jiu-jitsu academy that I was training at. And then one day during a noon class, because I was working the front desk, I didn't expect to teach a class, but my instructor called in sick, which he never did. And he said, hey, man, will you do me a favor? Just teach the noon class. Teach them like an arm bar, teach them a triangle choke, teach them how to interchange between the two. And then after that, just let them spar. And I was like, yeah, not a problem. I know you're sick, so I'll do it. After that, all the guys stayed around. We were kind of shooting the shit. We were talking about martial arts related subjects. We got on the subject of McDojos, and then everyone left after that. Well, one of the guys, it was only his second class in martial arts ever. So he literally just signed up. He did his free trial class. He came in, he did that class. And he stopped me after everyone was leaving, and he stayed behind, and he said, hey, what's a McDojo? I know you guys were talking about that, but I don't know what that is. And I kind of explained to him what has now become the basis of the 5 rules of the page. And I kind of explained it to him, and he said, well, why doesn't anybody do anything about that? And I said, that's a good question. And I had already been in martial arts for quite a while by that time. So I thought to myself, well, that's a good question. We don't have a regulating body to martial arts in general. You have small organizations that take care of certain arts, but there is no regulating body for all of martial arts. It doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. And so that night I couldn't stop thinking about it. I woke up the next day and I started McDojoLife.
Wow.
And it's gone through the roof. I want to talk to you a little bit later on how you grew the page and if it's organic or if it's been a struggle. Because is this how you, and I don't mean this as an insult, I mean it's a legitimate question. It's a goal of mine. Is this how you make a living doing this, calling this out? Or do you have other stuff you do? Like do you still teach and have a school or a dojo yourself?
No, McDojoLife is my full-time job now. It has been for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. And, you know, it's a job like most other jobs. I'm a workaholic, which probably helps. So like I work all the time. I usually do about 15-hour days every day. And I don't take holidays off. I still notice on Christmas Day, you're still going to see a post. On Thanksgiving, you're still going to see a post, even if it's just one post a day. Because when you set yourself a goal of making a house, and this is a Will Smith thing that I heard from him, so I don't know how old the saying is, but if you want to build a house, start with 1 brick at a time. Just 1 brick every day. You don't sit there and think about, I need to get all this done today. That's not realistic. Set yourself a goal that's realistic, and 1 brick a day is realistic. I can do 1 post a day. I can find that time. And so I take the time to make sure that I get that done. And now on top of that, doing original content, making sure I answer everybody's direct messages, which is roughly on Instagram alone, not including Facebook, YouTube, which doesn't have an inbox, but just making sure I keep up with that. Not including Twitter, not including other social media platforms. Instagram alone is roughly about 250 messages a day from 250 different people a day. And that's an average. Sometimes it could be more, sometimes it could be less.
So, you know, this, and Jason, I'll let you jump in a minute. Jason's going to be asking you a lot of questions around the terms that I don't know. And plus he's a fanboy like I am.
I'm a fanboy.
Yeah, we are a fan. But I watch other things that kind of do what you do. Like I've got a guy that calls out in fake Navy SEALs, and I watch him all the time.
Stolen valor for sure.
Well, but eventually, do people now just send you stuff? Do you have to look real hard for material, or do you have people sending you stuff all the time?
Well, I have people sending me stuff all the time, but I will say probably about 90% of the stuff I get sent, I don't agree with. So I don't just post things just to post them. Like I said earlier, I have very specific rules to the page that I follow. You'll never, if you look through the page, feel free, you will almost never, I'm not going to say never, never, but you will almost never, unless it was made as a joke, see me post someone just training by themselves, someone just hitting a bag, someone just working out, no matter what the art is, because my goal is not to pick on people. Right. My goal is to call out frauds. And so con men, like I do the research, like I don't just look at something and go, and then post it. Like, I'm not a child, I'm a 36-year-old man. Like, I'm not, why do I have to pick on people? My goal is to help the martial arts in many different ways, but mostly the martial arts industry is very self-consuming. And it has been since I've been in the martial arts, since I was 12. Every art thinks they're the best art and thinks every other art is garbage. That's how martial arts works.
It's pervasive.
So as an industry, it's very implosive. It's not actually built for growth. And I had this situation, and I mention this often, but it's basically the best way I can think about it, is I went to SHOT Show 2 years ago. And SHOT Show is amazing. It's a great time. It's a gun industry thing, if anybody doesn't know, where it's the biggest gun expo pretty much in the world for independent sellers, buyers, people who are, owning gun stores and things like that, right? So you get everything there. I mean, you'll find people who are there making huge arm deals. You'll find guys who are there who have a local shop where they make custom hand grips. But it's so big that they tell you beforehand that this week-long expo, you will not be able to see everything if you try to walk and see everything. That's how massive it is. It's 2 floors, and it takes over 2 floors of this huge hotel in Vegas. It's massive. And they weren't lying. I got there, I walked around. There was no way I'd be able to watch everybody or see everything. It'd be impossible. But it kind of opened my eyes, because the gun industry has not been around nearly as long as the martial arts industry. We can pretty much agree to that, right? Hands and feet have been around longer than guns. And so since the martial arts industry has been around for so much longer, I noticed that when I go to the Martial Arts Super Show, which is our big expo for the martial arts industry, you can walk around it with it like 15 minutes. It's also like a week long, but it's more geared towards like seminars and talks and speeches and things like that. But still, even with all of that, why is it that the martial arts industry is so small on our biggest stage, whereas the gun industry is so big?
It's massive.
And I thought about it really hard, and the only real logical explanation I can come up with is that the gun industry, whenever they're confronted with an issue, even if there's infighting, will stop infighting and fight for their right to be able to own firearms. Yeah. As soon as some outside source comes in to start picking at the industry will rally together and fight that source. The martial arts industry doesn't care about the martial arts industry as the major issue. The martial arts industry cares about the individual organizations and egos within it. Yep. It wants to protect the guy at the top. It wants to protect their art. It wants to protect their sensei or their ideals or their belief structure. It doesn't actually care about the martial arts as a whole. And so it's very toxic. So what my page allows, and one of the more ultimate goals here is, one, let's weed out a lot of the more super toxic things that haven't been regulated or taken care of. The pedophiles, the rapists, the guys who are out there teaching things that are actually getting people hurt and killed. And also, let's give the community something to rally behind. I mean, all the rules that I set forward, I think everybody so far, I've yet to have one person disagree. I've had people add other rules that they thought should be there, but I've never had someone disagree with the rules that I set forward.
And Jason, I'm coming to you, man, with this in just a minute, but it sounds a lot like the other combat sport, which is boxing. We've seen boxing. When I grew up watching boxing, man, you could get good fights on Friday nights and Sunday afternoons. And then over 30 years, the boxing segmented itself into so many different places, and they started consuming. Instead of having a big picture about boxing and the sport of boxing, you saw kind of what you're talking about. We are going to we're going to grow by tearing you down, talking bad about you, or it just became ugly. And what happened is the fans just kind of went, never mind. Now it's a little different, I think, with the UFC. And I think I either said this to Jason or I might have said it to you on the video yesterday. The UFC now is almost like the Kleenex and the Xerox in the MMA world. Because when you say UFC, people forget there's other things other than the UFC out there. There's other really, I mean, seriously, when you say MMA to most people or UFC, they go, oh, that's the fighting. And they're like, no, that's a place to fight.
Right. Especially Jason, casual fans. A lot of casual fans don't understand that.
Yeah. Tell me real quick, man, how did you find McDojoLife? And then kind of respond to what he said about
I'm sure somebody shared something with me like, oh my gosh, hey, look at this. This is ridiculous, because I've been in some sort of martial arts my entire life. I started wrestling. Well, I did like 2 karate classes and then I dislocated my hip and I'm jumping a wave on a jet ski. Long story. Anyway, I was out of that. And then wrestling season came. I got plugged into wrestling. I kind of went in through that and started there at 7. Right. So all of my friends are through these relationships, and people send me that stuff all the time, like all the time. And I don't know. I just, from the rip, it was like, hey, there's a need for this, to highlight this. Cause you know, when you're doing something real very quickly, like wrestling or whatever, very quickly, you can kind of look at some of the stuff we see in Hollywood and professional wrestling and some of those things. And it's like, hey, that looks cool on TV, but that is so disconnected from reality. You know, like as a 7-year-old, I knew watching like some Steven Seagal stuff, like, not to say that nothing in anything you show could be applicable.
You're about
like,
to piss me off, dude.
There's a lot
Don't you start going after Steven Seagal, man. I will come through the screen.
We haven't even talked about his gun handling skills yet. But
yeah.
You know, I mean, there's a need for it. And like,
do you see what Rob was talking about though? How the industry is a little segmented as far as ours versus yours type thing.
So like,
I mean, you own a school.
I do, but you know, I think I'm super isolated because I spent so much time wrestling. I wrestled all through college, and then immediately transitioned like to MMA. There was one pretty good. Well, there are a couple MMA schools, but the one I got kind of plugged into was one of the first just pure MMA schools in Chattanooga. And it was rough. I mean, we had like 2 guys that were in there that fought in the UFC, and, you know, other guys that fought in local shows. And there was just no room for any BS anywhere. And so I've been really insulated, I guess. Like I don't have access, and I haven't been exposed to a lot of things that you like show and highlight in your videos. So in one sense, I don't consider myself like part of the martial arts industry. I'm like a club of kind of grappling people. That's really who we are and what we do, and it stops there. We don't do any striking in our school, like formally. I don't teach striking classes, none of that. We've got bags and some guys come in after hours or before hours and do some MMA sparring, but that's about it.
You know, we were talking yesterday, Rob, and the only thing you wouldn't talk about is family, because you get a lot of negative feedback. And if you're okay with me saying, you get a lot of people threatening like physical harm to you.
Yeah, I get death threats all the time. And it wasn't necessarily something that I thought would come with the job, but I guess in the back of my mind, I kind of knew that was going to be a thing. Over the years of doing McDojoLife, my ideas of what constitutes legit and what is not have drastically changed. What constitutes fake and what's not has drastically changed. Like doing the page and being able to talk and have an open network and actually taking the time to speak to everyone who tries to speak to you, you learn a lot. And mostly what you learn is different people's perspectives. And so you start to get a lot of different perspectives, and I start to look at things in a way that probably most people might not even agree with, and I don't really care because I'm not coming from a place of only speaking to 1 or 2 people or just my group. I'm talking from a place where I get to talk to everyone. And I get to talk to anyone. And I have open discussions every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on Instagram where I let anyone join. I do. And they can just join and we can talk about whatever you want. And ever since I started doing that, we have these great open dialogues. And what I've noticed is, one, I stopped looking at these people as specifically just martial artists. I started looking at the real issues, which were cult-like activity and behavior. And you'll actually get a lot of this in a lot of schools. And I think a lot of schools aren't even aware that they do that. And it doesn't really matter the art. I think that's another thing. Like I think that when you're a little less educated on the martial arts as a whole, what you can do is you can start saying this art versus that art. I think once you start becoming more educated, it's not really that at all. It can't be that, because it doesn't make any actual sense if you break it down, especially even with experiences of teaching. For instance, people are like, jiu-jitsu is the best self-defense art. I've heard it a million times. I don't agree. But that's because I don't agree that there is any one art that works that way, because there are ranges of combat. And if you look at any warfare ever, right, what's the first range of combat in any warfare ever, from me versus one person, or a country versus a country, a state versus a state? How does it usually work? Well, the first range is projectile range. Yeah. It happens in every war ever. You could be at a bar and somebody could toss a bottle at your head. That's the first range of combat. And so learning to be effective with a firearm could mean that I never even have to engage with you hand to hand if you have a knife, meaning that you would have to come forward to be able to use that in a different range of combat. So I was effective in my range, so I did not have to engage you in another range. This is something you can see in a lot of other places like Michael Venom Page or Raymond Daniels, yep. Guys who were effective at Taekwondo or sport karate, who when you're in their range, they eat you alive. And if they're effective at controlling that range, good luck. That's how every war starts. But then you start breaking it down and you start thinking, okay, well, what about the individual in each particular art? So when I say, people say jiu-jitsu versus Muay Thai, okay, let's do that for instance. What if the jiu-jitsu practitioner has cerebral palsy? Doesn't that change things? Because then we can no longer talk about style versus style. You have to discuss the individual, which is what it's always going to go. So as I start tossing out my philosophies about the martial arts and things like that, those things offend people because they really get offended. They go, man, well, how could you talk like that about jiu-jitsu? Dude, I'm a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. Been doing jiu-jitsu for a long time. I love it, but it's not the end all be all, because no art is, because it depends on the individual. What happens if you had a stroke? How effective are you going to be then? What happens when you're 75 years old? How effective will your art be? So it all boils down to, what are you getting out of this? Because it's not always going to be just the ability to beat people up. And once you reach a certain age, that will no longer even be a thing for you. So does that mean that I need to stop training martial arts at a certain age or a certain disability? Or do I get to keep doing it with a purpose of doing it for another reason? Well, we're all going to hit that crossroad. And what that boils down to is individuals' needs and what they're getting out of the art. Some people want to get a mentor. The only reason they started martial arts was because they saw Kill Bill and they saw Pai Mei, and they were like, yo, the old man on the mountaintop, I want to have a guy like that in my life to mentor me. Some people are like that,
Mr.
right?
Miyagi, thank you very
they
much.
want a Miyagi, right?
Yeah.
Some people do. That's the only reason, is they want a mentor. And they could give a shit less whether or not they could fight. And some people, they'll hit a plateau early, and no matter how much training they do, they will never get better than they were. We all have plateaus. Another might be somebody who wants friends. They want to work out, but they don't like working out alone, so they find a group activity.
I see that in my school.
Exactly. You know, another one might be they want to lose weight. That's another one. Like, so some people want to lose weight. The doctor tells them, yo, dude, you got to lose 30 pounds, man. And they go, well, I hate the fucking gym. And the doctor's like, well, why don't you just do martial arts? You know, you were talking earlier about you wanted self-defense, and it's the best of both worlds. So I think what happens is, with people's very limited thought process of me, I, that they project that out onto everybody else. Well, the reason I do it is because I want to be elite and I want to be able to beat people up. Well, that's cool. That might be why you do it. But telling everyone else that they're not legitimate because they're not in it because of why you're in it is a very egotistical opinion, in my opinion. And so what happens is, when I start saying these things, people in specific groups, when I call them out, it leads to a cult-like behavior where their need to protect their instructor or their organization or their art, simply because I didn't say anything negative to them. I just said, I don't think you're the end all be all, and I don't think anyone is, or any art is. And then all of a sudden I become this bad guy, and I'm like this guy who's making fun of them. And it's like, look, if I post a video of your instructor, I'm not saying that your instructor is a piece of shit, because I'm very open. I will just say those words if I think that, right? But if I post a video, maybe I'm just talking about the technique. And so many people, like, that always blows my mind. It's always counterproductive to them, is I'll post a video of an instructor doing something that is quite ridiculous. And then all the students will hop in to defend the instructor, and they'll dox their own instructor. They'll give out his name. They'll give out his location. They'll give out his school. I'm like, y'all are morons. I don't even do that.
That guy's probably thinking, please stop talking about it.
You're giving away all his information. But yeah, I get a lot of death threats because I'm so opinionated in the martial arts industry, and because I do go after those people.
But I think there's intrinsic value, though, in having conversations about, like, the efficacy of specific martial arts, and saying, hey, this is going to be more effective here or less effective here. And maybe maybe there's not as much, like, legitimacy to the core principles and techniques in this. I mean, do you agree with that statement?
I think that depends on what your definition of legitimacy is.
Effectiveness and self-defense. And so, like, when you were talking about the cerebral.
For who? So
I'm getting there.
Like, that's where things get very convoluted. It can be very difficult to discuss that, because if we're talking about an average, everyday, day-to-day person who's able-bodied, that might be different. But if we're talking about somebody who might have an obesity problem, or might have diabetes, or might have a stroke, or might have a disability, or might be missing an arm, or missing a leg, or not have function to be able to walk, those things no longer apply, because those people aren't necessarily in it for those things.
Yeah.
So when we talk about legitimacy, that's the most difficult thing. And I know what you're saying, right? Like the techniques themselves, if I'm an able-bodied man and that person's an able-bodied or woman, just in case anybody gets offended, or able-bodied person, and then these two people are going at it, what will work? Well, again, that will depend on the range of combat and how effective they are in being able to keep that range and how good they are as an individual. So here's another example. Somebody could be a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and fight a karate guy, right? And we've seen this tons of times with the Gracie challenges and things like that.
Who's the karate guy? Is it Lyoto Machida or
again, like, right? And so that's, again, so now we're talking about semantics of the individual. So it's either a rule or a guideline. And I think that's important for people to understand the differences. People want to make rules out of guidelines.
My caveat to that is always, though, and I say this when having these discussions with my own students, like I'm presupposing like similar size and comparable athletic ability and skill, you know. So if you're talking about, if we're talking about somebody that's done 6 jiu-jitsu classes versus somebody that's done, 15 years of karate, that's not the same thing. We're not apples to apples here.
Well, and so this is another thing. So what you're talking about is something that Dan Inosanto speaks about often. Are you familiar with Dan Inosanto?
No, I don't think so.
So Dan Inosanto is a legend. Definitely go check out his stuff. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a black belt in a ton of stuff. As a matter of fact, out of anybody, he might have like the Guinness World Records for actual legitimate black belts. But him and Bruce Lee were very close friends. He helped with basically run Jeet Kune Do because Bruce Lee wasn't teaching all the time. So who was teaching? Bruce Lee was making movies. So Dan Inosanto was that guy. But he has a philosophy on a lot of things. And one of the things I truly agree with is something called attributes. And they're tremendous in understanding how a fight will go. And everyone on the planet has different attributes. Height, weight, reach, size, aggressiveness, technique.
Cardio.
All of these things are factors. And so when we talk about just an art, what we're doing is we're only talking about one small slice of the pie, which is technique. And even within those techniques, there are people who are good at those techniques and shitty. One guy might be able to pull off an omoplata on 90% of the people he rolls with, where somebody else, it's the same technique.
Mounted triangle is not my game,
Right.
Just, so we were going over that last night. I was teaching that last night. I was sitting there looking like an idiot showing it. And it's just, I don't have the body type for that.
But at that point, let's say, for instance, somebody might never be able to do arm bars well. And obviously most people who do jiu-jitsu, if you're a blue belt by that time, you damn sure better have an arm bar down. But I'm saying, let's use a technique that people know, or even rear naked choke. Rear naked choke statistically is known to work 50% of the time, which is one of the highest statistics in MMA. So if you look at techniques, right, there was a book and it was called Fightnomics, and it's a fantastic book. And Dwayne Bang Ludwig, TJ Dillashaw's striking coach.
I've got the old school Sinister Dwayne Ludwig t-shirt. You remember the one, the Sinister brand with like the angel and the wings?
Anyway, for sure, man. Yeah. And Dwayne Ludwig's awesome. But when you look at his stuff, he created something called the Tao of MMA. And the Tao of MMA is basically Moneyball for MMA. It's actually a really genius way of looking at things. They took all the statistics from this book called Fightnomics. And that book kept track of statistics from UFC 1 to 100 on what was the most effective. What were the traits of somebody that would make them more deadly, less deadly, more likely to win. All submissions over the course of 5 rounds, the odds of you getting that submission go down drastically, except for one submission, which is a triangle choke, which makes a lot of sense because for a triangle choke, the person has to be in my guard. They have to kind of break their posture down a little bit. When they're tired, they just do that for you, which is awesome. And you're on your back, so you get to rest, and you might have a moment of explosion to be able to get your hips up, wrap that triangle in. Maybe they go arm in, arm out, and make their own mistakes for you, which would always be nice. But the odds go up as rounds go on.
Yeah.
The highest submission rate for any technique is 50%. So that means half the time you try it, you'll probably get it, which is a rear naked choke. But let's say there's a guy who has a rear naked choke and he knows rear naked chokes and he does them all the time, and his rate statistically is much lower. Maybe he can only get his rear naked choke to work 35% of the time because of some small detail, right? The rear naked choke still works. It just doesn't work for him.
Right.
So when we talk about techniques, like when you do styles, you're basically what you're doing is you're clumping in a bunch of techniques. You're saying Aikido is comprised of these techniques and Taekwondo is comprised of these techniques. There's a lot of crossover. For instance, a front kick, front teep, front snap kick is on almost every art. It's usually a day one thing. And even jiu-jitsu somewhere in there, you probably learned how to do a front kick somewhere.
The teat kick to create the distance. Yeah,
exactly. So you probably learned that. Does it mean that just because it's not effective for this person, that it's not effective? And so that's the hard part when we talk about like style versus style, because when certain people can make certain things work and other people cannot. Now, what styles are most effective are the ones that are able to get to their dominating position and keep it longer. And so that's why you see things like jujitsu, wrestling, and stuff like that become really effective, because they actually have hands on and they're able to hold that position much better than like a karate, where there's a lot more space and there's a lot more movement and ebb and flow within these different ranges of combat.
You know, and I'm sure Jason will click back in. We had this problem beforehand. Jason and Buttons don't always get along, and that's okay. One of the things, I was listening to you talk with Jason, and a lot of it is true in all sports, and it's the matchups, right? I mean, if you're talking about fighting or combat, it's the matchups. Here's Jason coming back in. But if you're a pitcher, you're going to approach each batter different based off what you know about them. If you're a football team, you know if they've got good cornerbacks or bad cornerbacks. Basketball, I mean, it's all about the matchups. And when you start talking about which style is best, I mean, I've had this conversation. Take MMA out of it. Take martial arts out of it. What style's the best? I don't know. Do you got Michael Jordan on your team, or do you got Clint Powell on your team? I can tell you what style's the best depending on the talent on the team. And so that's why I think these conversations are very entertaining. But from a guy looking out, I mean, looking into the sport, I hear what you're saying. It's all comes down to the individual and what they're looking to get from the sport. What they're looking to get from
a point. I do think that there are certain styles whose percentage chance of their techniques working are lower, because that's what it all boils down to, and why I brought up percentages earlier. Every art is comprised of a lot of techniques and or philosophies. Some arts are a little bit more on the philosophy side and a little bit less on the technique side. For instance, if you go to like an Aikido, a lot more on the philosophy side, a lot less on effectiveness. But for instance, if somebody is going and the only reason that they're going is because they want friends and the school that they go to provides them that, well, it's effective for what they were looking for.
That's it.
In terms of self-defense, the percentage chance of you pulling off a wrist lock mid-fight are very low, unless you can isolate that arm and dominate that position, which is things that more guys are doing now. Leg locks became very popular in jiu-jitsu, and then once leg locks became popular, guys were like, well, if you can do leg locks, I'm going to start doing wrist locks. And so now guys are pulling off high-level wrist locks. But the major differences between an Aikido, which is more standing wrist locks, and like a jiu-jitsu, for instance, which might be I isolate an arm the same way I would do for like an Americana or Kimura. I isolate the arm and then I can attack the wrist because the arm has nowhere else to go.
As soon as you got something blocking that elbow, that wrist lock is there. If you can immobilize the elbow, the wrist lock is there.
Yeah, taking away the ability for the person to be able to pull their arm away, because a wrist lock is very similar to the reaction you'll get of a guy putting a hand on a hot stove. Yep. You know, if the guy pulls his hand away because it's hot, it didn't feel good. Well, it's going to be the same thing with a wrist lock. But if I can isolate that person, make it so they can't move, and then put my hand on, have them put their hand on that hot stove, they're not going anywhere, and it's going to suck. Yep. And so I think the hard part with martial arts, and again, this kind of goes back to the thing of like everybody wants to go style versus style, right? I think that in order for the industry to actually grow, we have to stop doing that shit. We do. It's just the facts. If you really want the martial arts as a whole to grow, and not jiu-jitsu to grow, or boxing to grow, or kickboxing to grow, but actual martial arts as a whole to grow, then what we need to do is we need to start looking at our students and what's best for them, not what's best for our ego. And that's the problem.
Yeah, I'll jump in here, and I got two quick questions. First, I'll just say I think that started way back, at least for Clint Powell, growing up in the 70s, because I'm in my mid-50s, is when I used to watch Kung Fu Theater. I couldn't understand a word they were saying, but I saw different dojos going to other dojos to fight them and see which one's better. So I think it started back in the 70s when they were doing that Kung Fu Theater, man. We got to have the dojo challenge, right?
Well, I mean, there's a time and a place for everything. And so people always ask me, hey, how come you don't go to these dojos and just beat them up? Well, other than the slew of legal repercussions that could happen from that, I don't think that is the way to handle it. Right. I look at something like the Truth Campaign. And back in the 90s and early 2000s, it was major. It's massive. And the Truth Campaign was pretty simple. It was a group of people who said smoking is bad. That was it. And they wanted to prove to everyone that smoking was bad. Well, how do you do that? Well, they didn't walk up to the president of Marlboro and punch him in the face and go, see, smoking's bad.
Yeah.
See, I punched him in the face. That might be entertaining, but it doesn't actually get your point across. So what you do instead is your goal, if you really want to kind of change things, is information. Like you really need to get information out there to people. And the average person who goes into a martial arts studio, the only question that they typically know to ask is simply, how much does it cost? Somebody walks into a school for the very first time, they don't know to ask about your lineage. They don't know to ask about, so I noticed that you teach the armbar this way, but what if you taught it this way? Like this is a person who's never trained before. They don't give a shit.
They don't know
They
what
want to know,
is.
am I happy here? Am I getting my goal done? And are you ripping me off? Like, how much does it cost? Can I afford it? And will I enjoy being here? I'll take the trial class and see that. But that's it.
Do me a quick favor, and this will be a kind of mid-conversation or a little over halfway. What is yours? You have done some training in the past, and everybody, if you go to your pages, they're going to see what you're talking about. But bring everybody up to speed on what your training is and what your background is. And do you have is there one that you lean to, like when you're training, that you like better than the other one? Or is that a dumb question? I'm okay with dumb questions.
When we were talking earlier, I said my resume so fast. You said when I say it this time to slow it down. So I'll slow it down. I get asked a lot. So, but I have been in the martial arts industry since I was 12 years old. Which has been 24 years total because I'm 36 now, so I'm getting old. I am a 3rd degree black belt in karate, which is a freestyle karate. So it was much more like kickboxing than anything else. We did not do katas. We only pretty much just put gloves on and basically worked on kickboxing techniques. I am a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I am a 6-0 amateur boxer, a 4-2 amateur kickboxer. I was on an international kickboxing team for 2 years called Team Full Circle, where we traveled internationally and kickboxed in tournaments. I never count the tournament wins because it was like, there's like 30 something fights in a tournament. Like that's ridiculous to keep up with. I'm a 3rd degree black belt in Judo, which is a weapon system not too many people have heard of. You can look up my instructor. His name was Master Lee Barton. Basically just means I do nunchucks well, which is a very useless skill.
I saw, no, it's not. I saw the video with you
nunchucks.
and Izzy. That video with you and Izzy, like you threw the Michelangelo like clip. That was you, right?
Yeah, it's just fun. I like it.
Man.
Well, and then I've been doing martial arts business consulting for schools for about a decade now, and I ran a school myself for about 4 years. But after that, like I pretty much kept getting picked up to do consulting work, so I just started doing that instead. And then I've been running McDojoLife now for about 9-10 years. But so I've been at it for a while, and I don't expect everyone to see the industry the way I see the industry, but what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the holes in the industry, and I think that what a lot of people do is when they look at what I do, they go, well, why are you picking on these people? Like, first of all, I'm not picking on them. I don't know them personally, so I can't pick on them. I know nothing about them. But what I can see is I can see a major issue in the industry that are being ignored. Pedophilia in the martial arts industry is rampant, mostly because there's no regulating body to the martial arts industry. That means there's no true standard. And so since there is no true standard on what it takes to open up a school, that means that anybody could just make anything up and become a martial arts instructor. I could say I'm the 75th black belt in Rob Kwon Do, open up a school tomorrow, do no background checks on myself or anybody else, and then just start a school. And no one will care. No one will stop me. No one will intervene.
Real quick, do you think the internet's helped a little bit with that because people can look up stuff about people, or now if I populate it with enough content, can I bullshit my way through?
I think you can still bullshit your way through. I think that it kind of shocks people to think that, oh man, we're in the age of the internet, and UFC happened in 1993 when it started. So since that kind of put these things on a platform to show what is and what is not legitimate, I think that again is where people are flawed in attacking this, is because again, what is legitimate to you is not legitimate to someone else. So like they think that there is only one standard of legitimate. Again, most people who start martial arts don't even compete. Most people, I would say probably 75% of the people who do martial arts have never competed a day in their life. So why are they here if they don't want to test it? Well, to some people's standards of legitimacy, you're not legitimate unless you've been in a tournament or fought. Well, that's a dumb thought, because are we saying John Donna here is not legit because he's not been around the world doing tournaments, but he's produced some of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners on the planet, like Gordon Ryan, both of the brothers. Are we saying that they're not legitimate? Well, no. Well, then you can't use that as a rule. It's a guideline for you, but that's not a rule because you clearly agree that it's not the only way. So I think that what happens is because people think that they're so headstrong and like, this has to be what legit is, that they forget that not everybody views it that way. And since not everybody views it that way, just because they go to a school doesn't mean they're going specifically because they want to learn legitimate martial arts. Here's another instance, by the way. If somebody goes to a martial arts school and they want to go to cardio kickboxing, there's nothing wrong with that. Are they going to be good fighters? Fuck no. Are they going to be good hitting a bag? I hope. Depends on the school they go to, right? But is that not legitimate? Well,
hey,
sure,
real quick, I'll throw this out there to you. I'm gonna throw this out there to you, Rob. If we're ever attacked by heavy bags and they have no arms, let me lead the way. I am 100-0 against the heavy bag, man. I am badass.
I'm not. I broke my wrist one time.
That's because you should be letting me fight the bags for you, dude. Let me. I will lead. I'm Braveheart when it comes.
You got to toss the heavy hitters in the front, man.
Dude, absolutely.
I've got one L on my record from a heavy bag. Yeah.
You know, and I've taught cardio kickboxing for a while. And I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I never lied to my students. I never said that you're going to be a great kickboxer because you know how to hit a bag,
right.
You know, but that's not legitimate though. That is, you're learning a jab, you're learning a cross, you're learning a front kick, you're learning a round kick, and hopefully you're learning them correctly. Do I think that you're going to be a legitimate fighter? No, but if that guy loses 30 pounds and it changes his life for the better, does he give a shit? He doesn't care.
Well, 99% of the people that are taking anything aren't going to be the fighter anyway. It's like, you know, if you play football in college, the odds you go pro, everybody's like, I'm going pro. No, you're not. You're not going pro. And I would say most people that do anything like this, even if it's boxing, they're just doing it for other reasons. Those reasons that are bigger. I hate to say this, but it's bigger than can I fight? It's can I play with my grandkids, or can I lose the weight, or do I have more self-confidence? And one thing I think it does, and I learned this through boxing a little bit, is you've got to be a little disciplined, right? If I'm going to get good at something, I'm going to have to show up on a consistent basis. I'm going to have to be willing to get my ass kicked and not always be the best. Most of the time, I'm not going to be the best. Those lessons, it is, dude. And those lessons translate out off the mat or out of the ring. I mean, if you can do the hard stuff, knowing going into it, okay, at 6 o'clock, I'm going to get my ass kicked for an hour. Well, then I can probably make the hard sales calls, or I can probably be sacrificial in a relationship if you learn how to do hard things, if that makes sense at all.
Or you can probably defend yourself in a self-defense situation against an unskilled or untrained attacker. You know, I mean, so like, you know, you're kind of a lot of what you've talked about, Rob, has been kind of from the perspective of the student. And then maybe that's part of my problem in the way I think about this. But like as an instructor, like one of my biggest fears is I would give someone a sense of false security, like a false sense of security, you know, either by teaching them stuff that maybe wasn't great technique and isn't going to work in most instances, and isn't going to work for them and their body type. And then maybe through their time at my place, maybe we don't roll hard enough or whatever to where they really get, you know, the sense of what combat feels like, like whether it be in a tournament or, you know, I think there's a lot of value in competition and tournaments. I don't discourage or encourage my students to do it. If they want to do it, you know. But I think there's a lot of value in it because there are very few things that kind of mimic, and you know this as a competitor, and you do too, Clint, but like going out, standing on the line, shaking the hands, it's you and that other person, and then the judge or the ref, and we're here till this is over. Like that, going through that process, you're going to get adrenaline dumps and emotional roller coasters and all that kind of stuff.
Or you can do what I did and just ask yourself, what the hell am I doing?
Well, there's a saying, I forget who said it, but it's a beautiful saying. And it's that, you know, first of all, most people drop out in any martial art within a year and a half. On average. So in jiu-jitsu, they call it the blue belt blues, but this is every martial art. So it's not just jiu-jitsu, but on average, the average person drops out at about a year and a half. And I have a lot of theories as to why. There's a lot of situations and circumstances that pop up in people's lives. People move, people get injured, people get deployed, all kinds of reasons, right? But at the end of the day, it's just a fact. So if most students are coming to a martial arts facility and most students aren't going to ever compete, and most people aren't ever going to defend themselves, most people won't, then what are they doing it for? And so I'm not devaluing competition. I did it a lot. Like, I trust me, competition has a lot of good things. First of all, I think you learn the honest truth about yourself and someone else when you're in the ring with them. When you're fighting another human being, there's no more honest moment that you'll have with another person or yourself in the world. You know a lot about that person immediately. If they're sneaky, they'll be sneaky in the ring. If they lie, they'll lie in the ring. If they cheat, they'll cheat in the ring. If they're direct, they'll be direct in how they fight you. All of that stuff just comes out because it's very difficult to lie when you're in a fight. Even think about just you in a verbal argument with a significant other. You know, what comes out? And ain't the lies, the truth comes out. And sometimes it's truth that's been sitting in a bag waiting. Oh, yeah? Well, you did this and you did that and you did this. Like, oh, why didn't you say that shit like last week? Well, they've been storing it like little pieces of ammo, right? Because the truth comes out whenever you're fighting somebody. And you learn a lot about yourself in that moment. Are you going to quit? Do you have what it takes? Are you going to try to cheat? Are you going to be honest in this moment? Are you really hurt? Are you pretending to get out of this? All of that stuff comes out during that moment. I think that's a beautiful part of martial arts. And I don't think that that should be taken lightly. I do think that that's important. But there's this quote and it says, martial arts is for everyone until a few years in, and then it's left for just a few select savages. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. But at that point, I would think, you know, for instance, when people start martial arts schools, most people do this thing where they've been under an instructor and I'm proud to say I was under this instructor for decades. That I am a black belt under Henzo. I am a black belt under John Donahue. I am a black belt under Hoist. And they'll say this and revere their names. Right. But then when they open up a martial arts school, they won't take the time to learn any martial arts business. And so what happens is they're only left with what's on the mat. They have no clue about retention rates. They have no clue about lead generation. They have no clue about attendance. They have no clue about organization. They have no clue about budget. They have no clue how to actually draw students in and to keep them. They don't know about callbacks. They don't know about pre-framing. They don't know about insurance is another one. They don't know about how important it is to keep a facility clean or to put aside money for equipment that they might need later on or to pay their staff. 90% of schools don't pay their staff, and it's the most ridiculous shit on the planet because they're not treating it like a true business. They're treating it like a hobby. And when you do that, what happens is the people who are treating it like a business are more likely to stay in business than the people treating it like a hobby, even if the people who are treating it like a business suck at martial arts. Yeah. And that's what happens. You wind up getting more of these people who suck at martial arts but are great at business, so their schools continue. Meanwhile, all the people who are great at martial arts look down upon making money and being financially successful like a bad thing. I can't tell you how many gyms I've been to where I walk into the gym and I look around and the bathroom obviously hasn't been cleaned in a day or two, right? Which, in all honesty, if you're in business, you should clean your bathroom after every class. Just a little free note for your business. The place smells. It's dirty. Staph infection runs rampant. Ringworm runs rampant. And they think that that makes them legit. Right. It doesn't make you legit. It makes you dirty as fuck. Clean your damn gym. You can teach a good Kimura and have a clean gym. But people, for some reason in their head in the community think, well, we only have like 10 students, but they'll all kick your students' ass. All right, fair enough. So your 10 students can kick any one of my students' ass. All right, cool. Well, what if I have 2,000 students? If this was a battle, yeah, any one of your students can kick my student's ass. But what about the war? Because my 2,000 can beat up your 10, I promise.
Well, not only that, are you going to be in business with your 10 in 2 years?
In 2 years.
Yeah.
And then
that's the other one.
You know, they'll sit there and they'll go, well, that makes us legit. That does not make you legit. Being poor doesn't make you legit. It makes you poor, right? And like treating your job like it's not really a job doesn't make you a martial arts instructor. It makes you a hobbyist. If you have a 9-to-5 that you do, and then you also happen to teach martial arts and someone asks your job, martial arts instructor is not your job. Yeah. That is your hobby. That might be your side business, but you might say it for ego. You might be like, yeah, man, I'm a martial arts instructor. No, the fuck you're not. If you go to your 9-to-5 and then go teach classes, yeah, you might be a hobbyist. You might teach classes, but your job title is whatever your day-to-day job is that pays your bills. And so I think that it's a very toxic thing that happens in the martial arts industry. That's that whole tear down thing we talked about. And so back to what we were talking about in terms of like competition, a lot of the gyms, not saying all of the gyms, but a lot of the gyms that is 100% their focus. Right. Like our only job is to make badasses. 9 times out of 10, I walk into those schools for business consulting and they go, what's wrong? We don't get why we don't have any students. Well, when I walked in, all your guys were wrapping their wrists. All your guys were mean mugging me. No one was talking to each other. The music in here is so loud, I can't talk to the guy behind the counter. Like, you can be badass and not be a dick. And so I think that's the problem, is people, if they really want to be successful and have a successful career in this industry, some of that ego's got to be put to the side. You know, ego should be a light switch. It's not something that's always on. You go into a ring with somebody, you turn that fucking ego on. Fuck that guy. It's my time to rip your face off. But whenever I'm done, I can shut that light off and I can go back about my day. And so when people join a martial arts school and they want legit technique, you can get that and get a place to lose weight and get a place to have friends and get a good mentor. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So that's for both sides.
I used to travel for my job, and I'm not going to name the city or the places, but one time I was traveling and I was in a city for a few days, and I went to this one school, had a real high name jiu-jitsu coach, very like resumed and accomplished. Like, if I said his name, you'd know it. The next day I was going to go back. They weren't there. The schedule was wrong, you know, based off what was on the website, which I'm guilty of that with my own too. But I'm one of those hobbyist guys that you're talking about, because I do have a 9 to 5, but I know that, you know, my
but that's the important part.
And we're in a small town too. We're, all of us, in all honesty, are just kind of thankful to have a place to be able to train. So it is what it is. But anyway, the point of the story there is, so there was another jiu-jitsu school like 2 miles down the road. I mean, Google, you know, and so I'm like, well, they say they've got class. I went down there. They literally had 10 times the amount of students. There was no name, no resume, no, but it was everything you just said, you know. I mean, everything was clean. It was nice. They were polite. They were, you know, they wanted a mat fee. The other guys just wanted to see if I was tough, you know, like it was a business, you know, it was a real business. And I've had a great time, had a good time at both, but it's like I follow those guys. The second place that really treated it like a business, they've moved like 2 times, upgraded I think they're in like a 10,000 square foot facility now. Like, I mean, it's apples and oranges, you know?
Yeah. I'm going to throw you a story out real quick. And then I got a couple, I want to talk about a couple, if you got time, a couple specific videos that I got
nothing but time today, man. But I'm down. I love talking shop. So I can talk this literally all day. I love this.
I don't know. I'm 53. This was back when I was 30. So I played rugby for a number of years, and here locally, I would say his name. Everybody would know him, but me and a couple buddies, they were veterans, so they're way more, they're braver than I am, but we all played rugby together, and we were all like, hey, we want to go take some jiu-jitsu. Now, this is when all my shoulders still worked, and anyway. So we went into the gym, and I'm not kidding you. When you two are talking about this, I'm smiling, because this is exactly the conversation, and I'll paraphrase, but it's exactly the intent of it. It's exactly the meaning behind it. We said, hey, there's 4 of us, right? And my buddy who lives here, his name is Nebraska. His nickname's Nebraska because he played football at Nebraska. And I think, Jason, you may know Nebraska, Kurt. Anyway, this is where he trained at. And we were like, hey, we just want to learn. You know, we all got kids. I'm 30, I'm 31, I'm 28. We just want to come to a place, kind of have the camaraderie you're talking about, learn something, test ourselves. Bottom line was, he goes, I train fighters. If you're not going to fight and you're not willing to fight all the time, you're wasting my time. And he goes, I actually charge people more than that. And I didn't get mad. Two of my buddies got mad. I didn't get mad because I'm like, that's his gym. I'll go, you know, my thing is, if I don't like the music they're playing at the bar, I'll go to a different bar where I like the music. So we went someplace else and I started doing some boxing stuff, but it was exactly what you said. He came across, he's like, hey, I only train fighters, dude. And if you're not going to be a fighter, you're wasting my time and I'll be wasting your time. And I looked around it and they were mean mugging and they were all and I'm like, I mean, I can get my ass whipped with the best of them, but I don't want to do it on a daily basis. Well, Jason, what were you going to say?
The second school that I went to, the guy, like the story of the 2 schools, right? The second school that I went to, the guy, I'm talking to him afterwards and I'm telling him like, hey, you know, I've got a place. I just opened up at that time. He was like, I don't train fighters. He literally said the exact opposite of that.
Yeah.
It's like, well, if you're going to fight here, it's like, I will say it was $150 a month. If you want to be a fighter and you want to train with me, it's double. It's $300 a month.
Because he did the opposite.
You're running all my good guys out of my gym. You know, I'm having to go to competitions with you. Anyway, I thought it was really funny that he literally told me the opposite.
It could be very convoluted. And that's why I think it's so difficult for new people. Like, first, most martial arts schools don't do cold calling. We don't knock on doors randomly. Most of the time, somebody called you or found out about you through an ad, however you advertise, and then they're already coming to you. So that means half the battle's done. Right. They already want the product that you're selling. They already had a conversation with you on the phone, I hope, by that time. And then by the time they walk in, it's up to you to fuck up the sale. Like, right. They want to be there. And so, like you were talking about the gentleman who said, I only train fighters. I have like that's a double-edged sword. On one hand, my biggest thing is all about honesty. You could do whatever you want as long as you're honest. Yeah. If you're there and you want to learn how to be hard-nosed and the instructor can teach you that, that's awesome. Be that. Do that. If you're there and you want to learn how to be a stunt performer, well, an MMA gym might not be for you. Maybe you need to go to a Taekwondo school or karate school like XMA in California. They pretty much only train stunt performers. Will you get famous? Hell yeah. Will you be good at the art side of martial arts? Yeah. Will you learn some basics? Yeah. But will you be a fighter? No. Right. That's like the same conversation with Bruce Lee, right? Everybody was like, well, what would Bruce Lee do now? Like, he'd be an actor. That's what he was before. I'm not downing Bruce Lee, and I'm not saying he couldn't fight. I'm just saying his job title was not fighter. So, his job title was actor, you know? And
let me ask you a question, Rob. Like, how do you think we got here to this place, like culturally, where martial arts in my mind, looking at it, it had to be Hollywood. It had to, because it's like, unless you train and are actively like participating in martial art, like modern MMA style self-defense, I feel like most of the people, at least in the US, will look at Bruce Lee and still try and have that conversation. Who would win in a fight between Bruce Lee and Jens Pulver, you know, or Chuck Liddell, or, you know, something like that.
The Iceman, go ahead.
How did
my favorite is Muhammad Ali versus Bruce Lee. That's always been my favorite. Like, let's just be honest. He's going to kick the shit out of that little dude. He outweighs him by a lot. Like, you know, Bruce Lee has more technique, but then again, we were talking earlier about attributes, and he just has more attributes that would better suit an actual fight. But in any case, I'm not talking shit about Bruce Lee.
No, but how did we get to this place where people, like, their connection between like reality is so distorted, like in many things in martial arts? How did this happen? Like,
well, I think it's the equivalent of going to like a mechanic. So if I go to a mechanic, right, and it's the first time I'm going to a mechanic and I don't know anything about cars, and I go to the mechanic and I say, hey man, these problems, these are what's happening with my car. Can you take a look at it and tell me what I need to do to fix it? Or if I could pay you to fix it. So we take it to the mechanic, and the mechanic says, well, it looks like your windshield wiper fluid is out, so we're going to have to replace your brake line. If you didn't know anything about a car, you might be like, oh, okay, well, he's using technical terms, so that must be true. But then if you know something about a car, you go, the fuck does my windshield wiper fluid have anything to do with my brakes, right? But that's the difference. And I think most people, that when they're looking at martial arts, they only get what's coming in to them. They're not actually necessarily doing the research. And so rather than people taking the time to go to the most convoluted like job in the world, like if there are over 2,000 different versions of karate, 2,000. There are over 200 different versions of Indonesian silat. Like, would the average person know that? No. When they hear karate, they just think karate. Right. And they think karate is just karate. Well, it's not. Right. Like, there are different styles of karate. There are Kempo karate. You have Kyokushin karate, which GSP was the black belt in. You know, like more traditional Okinawan style karate, which you see a little bit more with like Lyoto Machida's very traditional. They still do katas. He drinks his own pee, which is weird. That's part of the art, but you know, it's neither here nor there. But at the end of the day, they're only getting the information that comes in. And so what's happening is there is no Angie's List for martial arts. It doesn't exist. There's nobody sitting there saying, hey man, what style of karate you're looking for? Okay, let's find that for you. They just Google karate and see what pops up and just go with whatever people tell them. And so I think what happens is there's a lot of misinformation. And I think that people think that, for like, people right now are going like, man, like, do you fight UFC? Like,
you're right.
What? The style? Do you do UFC style fighting? Like, you mean MMA? Like, but that's because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
That's naive. So I just think that the average person is naive to what is and what is not effective in a real martial arts situation. Even though there is information out there, imagine if somebody was coming to you, or you came to them, and you went to there for your first trial class, you enjoyed it, and then the person gave you information, but that's the only source of information you have. And so as that person's telling you, you might trust that person because they're your instructor that has that veil of honor and respect and integrity. That's what you've been taught about martial arts since we were kids. Is that's what it's about, right? And so you get there and you trust this person. And then meanwhile, like Dojo Pizza, this guy was molesting like kids over several years. Or you get a place like a more like old school traditional, what people will call it, where they'll take a bamboo stick, and if you don't do something right, they crack you over the back of the head with it because you did something wrong. And people will think that that's legit. No, that's abuse. Or Indonesian silat, for instance, where they'll take these giant boulders and throw them at kids in order to toughen them up because they believe in something called tenaga dalam, which means inner power, which is their version of chi. I've seen kids run over and killed in a group full of thousands of people watching by a truck because they believed so much in this. So when it comes down to like, how did we get here? We've always been here. The difference is that no one's ever actually took a step back from their individual art and looked around to see how convoluted things have become.
We've always been here. So you think this has been like the case for martial arts for hundreds of years? I mean,
for sure.
Really?
For sure. Well, think about it. My favorite martial artist, by the way, is Miyamoto Musashi. It's my favorite martial artist of all time. And Miyamoto Musashi, what he would do is he would go from town to town, challenging the best fighters, and he would murder them.
Yep.
Here's my favorite martial artist. Think about this. If I was going to tell you this about anybody else on the planet in any other industry, you would think that that person's a fucking psycho. I'll tell you Miyamoto Musashi's story, but from the concept of an accountant. All right. So this accountant, not samurai, not Ronin like he was, but this accountant goes off and he's in war, and his side was losing, and so he deserted and ran into the woods. Right. That's exactly what happened with Miyamoto Musashi. His side was losing, so he hid in the woods. If I say it's Miyamoto Musashi, you go, oh, it's the greatest sword fighter of all time. If I say it's an accountant, you go, that bitch, he ran, right? Yeah. Then he hid in the woods for years, decades, I think over a decade. Meanwhile, they were sending armies in to find him. And he was known to kill entire squadrons of people that would go into these woods, 10 people at a time, because he knew the woods, and they didn't. So they were wandering around the woods lost, and he'd run to the back of the line and kill that guy and run off into the woods. Then when they turned around to go attack this way, he had already flanked them and ran around the back, killed the other guy. I mean, he'd been known to do this. And then out of nowhere, this dude emerges, and he goes from town to town, and he starts challenging people to fights and killing them in these fights. In today's standards, you would go, that guy's a fucking psycho. He's a murderer, right? But if we look at it from a perspective of a martial artist, we go, oh, that's awesome. Like, what is fucking wrong with people? Like, we think that martial arts is some kind of, it gives you a pass to be a douchebag. Yeah. And so what happens is, like, and this is my favorite martial artist of all time. He was a homeless dude who murdered people. That was like, if you boil his story down,
there's a bunch of those in San Francisco right now, I think.
And so, yeah, I think that people have been manipulated in the martial arts for a very long time. And it goes to show you that, you know, first of all, China's been doing it forever. China's been using falsehood of kung fu to lie to people forever. There's a guy over there named Xu Xiaodong. And Xu Xiaodong is a guy who's been challenging these fraudulent martial arts and masters to fights, and he's been beating the shit out of them. So much so that the Chinese government makes it now illegal. They passed a law last year because of this guy that it is illegal to call yourself a master unless you get permission from the Chinese government, because this dude was beating up so many masters. Wow. Right?
Well, that's another rabbit hole I've gone down on YouTube as well. After I found your channel, I started YouTubing, you know, what happens when these fake guys meet reality. And here's what, and if nobody's seen this, and I'm the non-martial arts expert, let me give you what it looks like. It looks like somebody standing here like this,
getting punched in the face a
bunch. Whack. And then it's this, a lot of tap outs and a lot of blood.
It's very accurate.
Thank you. I might be able to be a stunt man. Maybe that's my calling right there. You know, Jason, I'll say this. You think about America, though, because I don't go back. I haven't studied martial arts this long. But by the way, you said the Blue Belt Blues. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, the Blue Belt Blues.
Right here, UKS Karate Studios, 1 year and a half from the age 16 to 17 and a half, hit my blue belt, and I got out. So I am the exact guy you talked about. So anyway, but you think about it, man, when I grew up, a little bit what we were talking about earlier, it was boxing, and then there was wrestling. And there was two types of wrestling. There was the wrestling I did in high school, and there was the wrestling I watched on Saturday mornings when people were hitting each other with chairs. And so we had the striking, and the only grappling that I grew up watching. I didn't grow up watching soccer either, but something happened in the 90s where both jiu-jitsu and, you know, these things blew up in the United States. They'd been in the world forever. They just came to the United States a little late. In the 90s, man, when jiu-jitsu hit, it was, in my opinion, it was one of those opposite of karates. Karate, when I took karate, it was striking. We did have katas where I was. That's what we did, the katas. And we had a little sparring, right? Just enough to know that, I was good at getting hit in the face. But then there's this thing where I'm watching this little guy named Gracie, and I say little compared to the guy he's wrestling that's 200 something pounds, just making this guy go to sleep with his feet and his legs.
And it wasn't a wrestling match, you know.
No.
It was the guy did not show up to be in a wrestling match. He was forced.
Listen, I wrestled.
It's an involuntary wrestling.
I wrestled through
like
7th grade.
Yoga.
Like involuntary yoga.
Yeah, in 7th grade. And when I wrestled, you know, they broke it up, and then one got on top, one got on the bottom. They were post up, and it wasn't that kind of wrestling. It wasn't that kind of grappling. So it was all so new to me. Yeah. So of course there's going to be this comparison, I think.
And what you're saying actually goes with what we were talking about how it has this always been this way, you know, has this always been so convoluted. And before the UFC, there was a precursor to the UFC called the Gracie Challenges.
Yeah.
And the Gracie Challenges, anybody who's done jiu-jitsu, it's legendary what they did. And it really was the litmus test for what works and what doesn't in combat. And so what they were doing was the Gracies had been culminating traditional Japanese jiu-jitsu for a very long time. And they had been working on expanding to create something bigger and better. And so when they were learning this traditional style of jiu-jitsu, they started to kind of experiment with other things. And they started doing a lot more. I think the term is randori, if I remember correctly, a little bit more of the sparring.
That's what they call sparring in judo.
Yeah, and then they started doing a lot more of like the newaza, which is like in judo, you have like the throws and stuff like that. Newaza, what was going on the ground. So they started taking out a lot of the more stand-up stuff, and they were focusing on, let's get this to the ground, because this is where I can kind of make the fight a little bit more in my favor.
Right.
And so they were perfecting all these techniques. Well, they were going, well, how the fuck do we all this is versus us? Like, all right, so how do we make it so that way we can actually perfect this? And so what they did was, famously, and they took out a 2-page ad in Brazil. This is in the local paper. I'm sure I can find it somewhere one day. And the 2-page ad basically was just them talking shit purposely about every other art and challenging anybody that wanted to come. And they were purposely poking at people because they needed them to have a reason to come fight them. Right. And so, of course, these people would come all over. And luckily, I think this was in the 80s, I think is when this was more happening. It's like in the 80s was like the precursor, because 93 was when UFC happened. So this was before that. And so all of these matches are on tape, which is crazy to think that this huge historical part of martial arts history is on film, and you can just watch it on YouTube. And so if you type in Gracie Challenges on YouTube, you can see all these incredible matches with all these MMA legends when they were younger, like real young, like sometimes teens, sometimes, their early 20s. Even the Diaz brothers back in the day, they were doing Gracie Challenges at like 15 years old and fucking up grown dudes. Because what they were doing was they were having a litmus test. They said, we want to see if our techniques will work.
Right.
And so they did that better than any other art, in my opinion, period. And why? Because they were willing to say, you know what, let's toss out art and style, and let's say these are the techniques that we have. You have your techniques. We disagree. Let's work on this. And it was very respectful. For wholesale ass whoopings they were handing out, it was bowing at the beginning and the end. There were handshakes at the beginning and the end. It was very like respectful for how much of a backyard brawl it kind of was.
Right.
And so that created this beautiful thing that's happening now. That's a precursor to what I consider what we're going through right now, which is what I call the martial arts renaissance, which is the UFC happened in 93. Yep. And up to that point, the action star was still a thing, right? You got to see guys like Jean-Claude Van Damme and Steven Seagal and, fucking Stallone and all these great actors who were action stars. And then we saw the real thing happen in real life, and we were like, that shit doesn't look at all.
It doesn't look alike, right? It's not even close, right?
And so people, I think the action star started to die off around that time. And if you notice, we haven't really had like an action star like that hasn't just been a B-list actor in a really long time. Like, it took a while for us to be able to see like John Wick. But why did John Wick become so popular? because of the renaissance that the Gracies started. They basically said, is your shit real? Find out. And then when they went into the cage and were getting yoked up, people's perception of reality started changing. And so now you have these beautiful martial artists like Raymond Daniels and Michael Venom Page and Stephen Thompson, who aren't traditional jiu-jitsu guys, but are still fighting and winning on the upper echelons of martial arts, which would have never been possible in 93 because those arts had not evolved yet.
Right.
They had not been put in this corner and said, you have to evolve or we're going to move on without you. And then now you see arts like a lot of Kung Fu, not arts, not all. Sanda's legit as fuck, but a lot of Kung Fu arts kind of stayed more traditional, like in China. And so that's where you get the birth of Shu Xiaodong, where Shu Xiaodong is like, that's bullshit. Like, dude, I've been watching MMA, I've been training MMA, I've been doing other things other than what you guys are teaching, and that doesn't work. And then him in China, in this like communist country, is saying, you guys might not be aware, but martial arts has been evolving like hell around the world. I would like to help you evolve it. You're full of shit. And so then he does the opposite of the Gracie challenges. Rather than having people come to him, he said, I'll come to you. And then so he's going around China beating these people up. But that's all because of jiu-jitsu. It really is. Brazilian jiu-jitsu started this renaissance that forced every other martial art to step up their game and become more combat effective. And so we're in this beautiful spot where, you know, arts are getting better. Arts are incorporating jiu-jitsu techniques now. You know, like where they weren't before. Karate katas now. Back in the day, a lot of katas, you have something called bunkai. And in a kata, bunkai is when you're doing a kata and people are interpreting what that technique means. They're like, well, this means it's an out block, where somebody else will be like, no, it's an overhook and I'm yanking your shoulder out of socket, right? Like, that's two different perspectives. Well, you're starting to get a lot more of the realistic perspective now because they're forced to. You can't just make shit up anymore. Like, you have to prove it. And I think that that's where we're at. And it's really a beautiful time for martial arts, minus the last year of COVID. You know, It's been cool. It's been cool to see. We're living in a time of evolution.
One of my favorite. Oh, go ahead, Jason. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, what about kind of the dogma that exists, even in like the newer stuff that is pushing the what's real and what's not? Like, I mean, you have to have seen it. Like in jiu-jitsu, you get certain factions of jiu-jitsu that are like, oh, foot locks and ankle locks are the devil, and then you know, you get other guys that are, oh, we're only going to do foot locks. Like, to me, and I made a bunch of you know, fellow jiu-jitsu guys angry and upset one time because I standing back and looking like, hey, we're having this debate that everybody always has, or what's sort of the most comprehensive thing? And I made the argument that like, hey, judo is if you could only have one, judo is really a more comprehensive self-defense system than just jiu-jitsu, because it really focuses on that takedown component. You know, maybe not modern day judo, but I mean, like, I guess where my question was, how do you prevent yourself from falling prey to the dogma that happens in your own little faction? Like, how what do you think on that?
Well, I think that when we focus on individuality in the martial arts, I think you start to stray away from the dogma. I think that people want naturally to belong to a group, and it's very comfortable there. You have gi guys and no gi guys, and the no gi guys could be like, gi sucks, it's not realistic. Like, bitch, have you ever been anywhere other than Florida? Like,
where you don't have clothes on? That's right.
I'm wearing a jacket now, like in Florida. Like, this is a lapel. Like, I can still choke the shit out of somebody with it.
Absolutely.
Like, if I'm at the beach, no gi's gonna be really handy. But like, if I'm out and about in New York and everybody's wearing a jacket, well, that gi will come in handy. So like, it's very convoluted, but that's like what I was talking about, right? And you were saying, how do we get away from that? How do we get away from this dogma of like, this is better than this? At the end of the day, just think about individually. I'm not doing martial arts for everyone else. I'm doing McDojoLife for everyone else. I'm doing McDojoLife because I think this helps people. But when I train, I'm training for me. I'm training for my time, and I'm training to enjoy myself. I'm training to learn as much as I possibly can to be the best I could possibly be. And so I think that when we start eliminating what I can and can't learn, that's cult-like activity. That's when somebody goes, oh, you're learning that? Okay. Yep. Like, what cult do you belong to that gets to tell me what I can and can't do in my spare time?
You're essentially a book burner is what you are.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, leg locks, like, let that on fire, get the fuck out of here. Right. Why? Because you don't do them?
Exactly, because you don't do them and you don't know them.
we interviewed Dean Lister for our documentary because we did a documentary about fakes, frauds, phonies, and con men and pedophiles in the industry. And when we interviewed Dean Lister, he did bring up that time where he talked to John Donahue and they were talking, and he brought up the legendary, like, why would you ignore 50% of the human body?
Right.
That, for some reason, for martial arts, came across as genius.
Right.
And I'm not calling Dean Lister dumb. I love Dean. Me and Dean are homies. We talk all the time. But what he said wasn't like this giant epiphany.
Right.
It was common sense. But because in the martial arts it's so convoluted and everybody's so backstabbing and everybody hates everybody else, and if you don't do what I do, it's not legit, that very common sense thing came across as this like genius quote.
Well,
it's somebody had to have the courage to get outside of the dogma from their roots.
And two, though, it's like two horses. One horse is that has the blinders on walking by buildings, and no, the horse that doesn't. To the horse that doesn't, it's like, of course, there's buildings around us. The horse that has blinders, when somebody takes the blinders off, they go, dude, did you know there's buildings around us? Like, yeah, there's been buildings around us. You've just been looking at it like this right here. And
which is a good analogy. You know, you can take a horse and then take its, what is it? The reins of the horse, and you could wrap it around a chair, not tie it in any way. And typically, if the horse is trained, it'll just stay there. It could leave.
Well, look at elephants. They put big chains on baby elephants in the circuses back in the day when they used to do that, and the elephant got so used to having something around its leg. The older it got, the smaller the chain had to get, and eventually the elephant could just be tied up with a little rope. Why? Because in the elephant's brain, if that's on my leg, I can't go anywhere. We get trapped into. We don't look outside our thing. Hey, I want to. Go ahead.
Your analogy of that is fantastic to what you're talking about, which is like the dogma, right? It's basically where we've become. We've had so many people in the industry tell us what we can and can't do that when someone steps outside of that box, it just comes off as like, oh my God, that's like the greatest thing ever.
How about from the waist down? Holy shit, man. Are you kidding me?
What about the feet? Oh, feet. Oh,
I'm getting into
all about this. This is fucking genius.
Hey, all right. I got to bring up two videos. I want to talk about some safety stuff, and then we'll wrap it up in the next 10 minutes. I promise you. We're going to play a game I always do with my first-time guest of Would You Rather. You don't have an option unless you click out and just leave me hanging. But first of all, I want to give one piece of advice that I've listened to in this thing. If you go to a dojo and part of their training is to drink your own pee, don't walk out. I don't know. I heard that, and that stuck in my head. I'm like, dude, I don't care how much it is. I'm out.
We still quote
Leona Machida requires his students to drink their pee. This is just something that he does, which I think is fucking gross.
Yeah,
we still quote the Chael Sonnen a lot. Do you remember when he was doing like the little song he made up? And Karate Boy Machida, will he show up with some fresh warm pee in a Starbucks cup? That was one of Chael's rants to try.
Hey,
to pick a
by the way, for you, Jason,
Jason,
for you the other night, I went down to Chael YouTube looking back at some old fights because I know he's one of your favorites. Hey, all right, two videos I've seen lately, and then I'm going to give you the floor to talk about one more serious part of this, and that is the safety component from people who may watch these things and probably like my daughter or myself. There's you guys that are up here and that's the water you swim in every day. Then there's the people down here that go, I'm going to take jiu-jitsu, or I'm going to go to a martial arts dojo or studio to learn self-defense. And they don't know that they're getting put in situations that they're going to get stabbed, shot, raped, and pillaged. But here's the two videos I saw. Thank you very much. And I don't know, real quick, we'll act like Rob's not sitting here, Jason. Have you been on his site and did you see the fat roll defense, the side fat grab?
I've definitely been on the site. I don't think it's
today or yesterday. I'll be honest. And I'm redneck from Eastridge, and I've been in quite a few. I mean, my record's not great, but I've got a winning record on the street just because I'm really picky about who I did that with when I was younger. I was really good at going, not that guy. That guy's going to
run from him.
Yeah. But the side fat where you're there, they're in your guard and you reach up and grab their fat and twist, and then you use your knee. Dude, I finally have a move I feel I could get a belt on. If that that's almost like what is it, the booby whistle or lose it? When I was in high school, they'd grab your nipple and go whistle or lose it.
Oh, the old purple nurple.
The purple nurple.
So that's a great video. And the other video that I think leads us into the safety component of this is there's two of them, and kind of the same thing. You're presented with a gun. I've seen the guy, and I know you and him have had back and forth. I think even Bisbing chimed in where the guy goes, "You dodge the gun." control the barrel. It's important.
Yeah, 2,000ths of a second. It takes his brain 2,000ths of a second to recognize.
There's a parody video that you posted where the guy just pulls the gun back and then shoots you. Like, what the hell are you doing? Along the same lines of that, you're presented with a gun, and the guy, you said it wasn't. You said it was serious. I have a hard time believing the guy meant it. He has a stick in his hand. Jason, have you seen this? He steps to the side, and literally in the blink of an eye of about 5 seconds, he threads the trigger guard on the gun with his stick, turns it backwards on the guy holding the gun, and I'm thinking to myself, that's got to be parody. But Rob, you said that was serious crap, Dave.
That is, unfortunately, was not parody. Like I said, I do research before I post. I think that if somebody posts like one thing here and there, most of the time I'm looking at technique and not the person. But I always research the person, because how do you think I get all this content? Like, I don't look at one video. I go down the rabbit hole and I find out who their instructors are and who their understudies are. And apparently that guy has lied about the Kyokushin karate groups. Got a hold of finding out who this guy is. He's lying about being a 10th degree black belt in that art, because he's not. And he is a legitimate con man. And that is his way of whatever it is he does. That, unfortunately, that guy was dead serious. And the logic there is so flawed. Because, hold on, I'm empty, by the way. We're good. Nothing in there. All right. So just making sure. There's always a gun guy who's like, right? So making sure this is empty, right?
Mine's right over here. Are we all showing guns? Do I need to get mine?
Yeah. Sorry, the camera. The person has their finger in the trigger guard, and he's going to take a knife and slide it through the trigger guard while your finger is in there.
And it's pointed at you.
Like, while the firearm is still pointed at you. Like, you're going to get fucking shot. But you were talking about somebody earlier, and that dude is probably one of the worst culprits, which is Dale Brown.
Is he out of Detroit?
Yes. So Dale Brown is outside of Detroit, but he runs something called Detroit Urban Survival Tactics. And the issue isn't really with everything that he does. I've never had a problem with everything someone does. I think that we all live in these shades of gray. We have some things that we do poorly and some things we do well. And some of the things that he has done poorly is he's lied to people about his, what will be and what won't be effective. And so when he's talking about certain things, I can agree with certain things that he says. But what killed me about it was when he's saying that someone's pointing a firearm at you and that you can just move your head offline before they pull the trigger and be able to reach up and grab the gun after that, somehow got interpreted into like, no one should ever teach gun disarms. Like, no one should teach that gun disarm. What you're saying is asinine. To say that somebody is going to dodge a bullet and that, like, we could do this right now. I could do it with my finger. I could point this at one of you. Let's just say you, sir. We'll just go. Like, where am I? I'm pointing over. I'm sorry, the camera's backwards. Yeah. All right. So, like, if you move, I'm just going to follow you with the gun. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then if you move and you respond, I'm not just going to stand there like a mannequin and keep my gun pointed at you. I now know that there is movement. I will also move. So all of the things that every expert on the planet have said about gun disarms is you need to have control of the firearm.
Right.
You need to get it offline. You need to get the firearm offline, not you just get offline. You need to get control of it and then move it offline, and you also move offline at the same time. Not like this whole, like, I'm going to dodge a bullet bullshit. And what was even worse was that he's teaching a child this.
Yeah.
He's ingraining this information into a child. And then that child's going to grow up with this false sense of security like that actually works. Unfortunately, it will not, because it's a lie. And what kills me even more of the ego of this dude is that he had people like Michael Bisping, like, responding. He had people like Henry Gracie. Like, I'm sponsored by a Navy SEAL run company. So he had the attention of like 7 Navy SEALs and other special force operators, tactical firearms instructors. He had all of their attention. And all he had to do was go, hey, guys, maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be wrong. But so far, this is what I believe to be true. Maybe one of you guys can come out and teach me a different way. But rather than that, he was so headstrong. He's blocking people left and right. He's blocking Ted Kennedy. And then he has the balls to go to Texas and then put in his stories like, oh, I'm in Texas. Who wants some? Like, no one wants anything from you, you dumbass. What they want to do is make sure your students are safe. Yeah. And then he has the gall to say, oh, well, I do this stuff for free. Bitch, no, you don't. Like, you charge $10 for someone initially for you to come out. And you're just a glorified security guard. So there's nothing legally you can do. You can be there, right? So you charge $10 to show up, and it's $1 per minute to be there. You're not doing anything for free. And as a matter of fact, I even have the dude on camera talking about how he doesn't do it for free, and he's proud to be able to get rich off of this. Like, I don't mind that the dude charges. I don't think that's a problem. But to always be tossing out all this free crap, like, dude, it's okay that you do some stuff for free. No one's complaining about that. That's awesome. You're doing this for the community. I think that's great. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it's a problem you teaching people self-defense. What I think is a problem is when you hide behind this veil of I know everything and none of the other experts are correct, but I am. And you're not willing to challenge your own thought process to go, you know what? Maybe there's a better way.
Yeah, and I think you see this a lot too, specifically. And I'm not hating on the gun industry because I am a gun guy, like big time. But when you see like gun guys starting to try and cross over to, the hands-on stuff, and they don't have any background in that, and they don't have any training or experience, and it's just you're trying to comprehend something. Like, you can be a very high-level firearms guy, instructor, competitor, whatever. But when that weapon goes away, or we get into a force like hands-on situation, the rules all change. And I don't love when I see, just being honest, I don't love when I see people teaching like firearms disarms. Not to say that there's not ever a place for it here and there, but like, I feel like every one of those should come with like a major caveat of like, hey, you're probably gonna die. Like in this situation, don't expect this to get you out of it. You have to understand this is something you employ when there's literally nothing on the table and you're going to get shot anyway, like. And
I have pet peeves. Like, for instance, I've been to, and obviously I train and I travel a lot now because of the page. And when I travel, I try to go to different gyms as much as I can. I get invited to a lot of gyms. I have to be careful about what gyms I go to, because some gyms I'll show up, and I've had this happen before, to where they want to try me. They like want to challenge me and see, like, dude, I'm just here to you don't see a camera, do you? I'm just here to train. But one thing that I started doing was I want 10 black belts before I die. That's like one of my ultimate goals, is I'd like 10 black belts legitimately in different arts before I pass away. So that means I still got hopefully another 70 years, given technology and how it might evolve, to be able to continue to train, even if eventually I end up in a Tai Chi class, barely moving, which I'm sure that'll happen. But I want 10 before I die. So I decided to start looking at other arts. And so I start training in all these different arts. And one of the ones I kind of came across that I noticed is interesting is Krav Maga. And Krav Maga has all these different factions, very similar to most martial arts. They have all these different small organizations and subsects of what they teach. But I did notice that a lot of the schools that I went to did this thing where you'll do like a knife disarm, right? And after you disarm the knife, they'll have you take the knife and put it on the ground, and then the other person has to walk over and pick it up. You weren't allowed to hand the knife back to the person, because a lot of the thought processes at the schools that I went to were, well, in the heat of battle, you might accidentally give it back.
Yeah.
But then you're going to go that deep into the psychology that I might, in the middle of battle and under duress, give the knife back. But then they'll teach you, again, we're empty. Then they'll teach you to disarm a firearm, which means you probably grabbed a hold of the barrel, which disabled the slide from being able to do its job. So that means you have a jam, right? I have a Glock. So chances are good that first round in most firearms is going to go off in the middle of the fight, right? I grab it, boom, gun goes off, right? And then now I have this gun, yay. But then they won't teach you to re-rack the firearm to clear the jam. And so in my head, I'm going, well, you took the time to make sure that I put this knife on the floor because of the deep psychology, but you didn't take the time to learn how the fucking gun works. It's gonna jam, stupid. Rack it, clear the jam. Until then, you have a paperweight.
Yep.
And so, there's a lot of that in the industry, though. There's this I'll put a lot of emphasis on this, but that's not so important. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of really important.
I just think you have to be I love seeing people branch out and want to widen their base, right? And so like if you're a gun guy and you want to take it to the next step, okay, well, let's figure out how to do some hands-on stuff, right? And then vice versa. I love it when jujitsu, like when people call me or like, hey, I want self-defense, the first thing I tell them is, hey, you need to get a carry permit and go, learn how to shoot. Like I literally tell people that when they call me, like, I don't want to be on the hook for you defending your family. That's kind of the first step. But
I just want to say this real quick. You go back to what we were talking about way earlier in this conversation. It's your definition of self-defense too. And and the reason I say that is because, I've got a buddy here named James Hogwood, and he teaches self-defense. And he says most of the time when somebody's going to act on Jason, right, they're counting on the element of surprise, and they're counting on the element of I'm the bad guy, you're the good guy. I've got this. There's a split second where I am in charge, and I can get, as long as I do something initially, if you're like, then I get you. And that's okay. He'll come back. So, but that's what he's dependent on. Bad people are depending on that surprise. Well, if you have some sort of training to where you are immediately pushing back a little bit, take the gun out of it, right? But if I'm pushing back on it a little bit, then all of a sudden the person that's the perpetrator goes, oh shit, this isn't an easy one. A lot of times in their brain, they're just going to be thinking, I just want to get out of here now. Now this is not easy. I'm not going to be able to enact my will on Jason. I just want out.
And I think situational awareness is a big part.
Well, it is, but I want to go to the gun thing because I wrote this down. In reality, I want to learn how to disarm a gun if I'm going to learn these techniques from somebody that's been trained and that does it. I don't mean this in a bad way, Jason. You're one of the toughest guys I know. You're a jiu-jitsu guy. I'm not going to come to you to learn how to disarm guns.
All right.
I'm not going to come to you to learn how to disarm a knife. I heard this conversation, and I don't think it was Jocko Willnick himself, but everybody knows Jocko, right? Someone was asking Jocko, how would a Navy SEAL do in UFC? And he goes, probably get our ass kicked. It's UFC. He goes, but if we're in a street somewhere and there's a building I need to clear and it gets then it's different story. It's that situation thing that's different. So if I'm really wanting to learn street techniques on how to defend myself, I'm probably wanting to learn it from somebody who has the credentials. And that's why I think, Rob, what you're doing with the guy in Detroit or whoever it is, they come across like they've been there and done that. And
and that's the thing about that one in particular. I would say almost nobody's been there and done that. Like chances are
there's a small handful of people that may have, but the odds are it's not my buddy Jason.
Yeah, and I would say it's a 99% of the people that have attempted those gun disarms in those situations have actually just gotten shot. I mean, I honestly believe that.
Like when I was learning gun disarms, like some of the first stuff I was really learning was by a guy named Mike Karnak. And he did this thing called Hangana, which was it's also an Israeli martial art, very similar to Krav Maga. Like basically he just rebranded his own version of Krav Maga. Firearms were a very big part of that art. And the thing about his art was it wasn't comprised of a lot of techniques. It was comprised of a lot of, what do they call it? I'll think about the word in a second. Basically, like these reference points is the word. And so it was all about getting to these reference points. No matter what happens, we want to always do these things so that way you don't have to remember a lot of techniques because it was more geared towards people learning it in a very short amount of time.
Right.
Whereas like, for instance, jiu-jitsu, if you really wanted to learn like how to defend yourself with jiu-jitsu, you really maybe need like a month of learning technique. That's it. You learn a couple takedowns, you learn a couple submissions, you learn a couple transitions and how to dominate in certain positions. Yeah. Like the average person doesn't know those things, so you could probably defend yourself fairly well, right? Get a good double leg, get a couple good takedowns behind you just in case the situation changes. Learn a guillotine, learn a rear naked choke, learn an arm bar, like learn how to get to a dominant position and control it. It doesn't take a lot. But if you're learning it for the art, you're going to learn forever. Jiu-jitsu never stops. It's just techniques keep evolving, right? Even 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu. It's like Eddie Bravo would just come and be like, all right, well, now we have this thing called the electric boogaloo. And then all of a sudden you have like 50 techniques that branch off of that because he's an innovator. And that's beautiful. But when it comes to like real self-defense, you only need a couple things, right? And so when I was taught the firearm stuff, we were taught that if someone wanted to kill you, they would just kill you. That's what a firearm does.
Yep.
Pull the gun, they shoot you, you will die.
And
you're
dead,
right?
Yes.
But there are reasons that someone keeps you alive. And knowing those reasons could help keep you alive. For instance, one of the reasons was a human shield, right? Which is obviously a very like drastic thing, but I need you. Like, I can't kill you, which is what you ever watch the movie Speed? The dude was like, shoot the hostage. Like, why did you shoot the hostage? Well, because now he's out of the situation. Like, right. I need this person to be a human shield, so I have to keep you alive. Well, if you eliminate that, then you no longer have a human shield, then that's a problem, right? So you being a human shield is keeping you alive, all right? So good. That's a good thing. If not, you would just be dead. Ransom, right? If I kill you and I'm trying to get ransom for you, then I can't get ransom. Like, people need to know that you're alive and get confirmation. So that's another thing. Information was another, which is, where's the safe? What's the combination to the safe? Where are your kids? Where are your keys? Where is this? Where
Give me your wallet.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? Or items. I need this thing from you, like the wallet or whatever. And so if someone wanted to kill you, though, with that situation, they would just kill you and take it.
Right.
That's all there is to it. So that's why one of the best defenses in those situations, just give them what the fuck they want.
That's my self-defense.
1,000%.
Yeah. Like, I can literally cancel all my cards with a push of a button. You think I give a damn? I don't even carry cash. I don't care.
I would rather you real quick. I would rather you take my wallet than my phone.
Or my life.
Well, I've learned all I got to do.
So, like, as instructors and stuff, I think we spend a whole lot of time talking about techniques, and a lot of these techniques you're probably never going to use. And we completely ignore like situational awareness. And then I don't know that I have the word for it. You probably do, but like emotional intelligence of when to kind of confront somebody. Like, we want to be polite and we want to be nice. And so if you get somebody that's exhibiting kind of predatory behavior and they're walking like an intercept course towards you or whatever, like there's steps to take, like I don't wait until it's too late to like let them know that I'm paying attention to them, and I might not be the easiest victim here in the parking lot. There might be somebody else that's a little bit smaller of a gazelle than me that would be easier to go get. Like, those types of things are things that we just, and I'm talking to myself here really, but like, no, I'm very concerned about self-defense for my students, but I got to address that stuff. Like,
well, there's depending on the instructor you talk to, like every instructor handles that differently. Some handle that deeply, like the guy who does spear, the spear system, Tony something. Why can't I remember his damn name? In any case, he focuses a lot on emotions and reactions and adrenaline and all that stuff, right? Do I think that all of his techniques are 100% great? No, but do I think that he probably does that side of things better than most people? Yeah. But that's because that's what he puts emphasis on. But to me, it kind of all boils down to understanding ranges of combat. And I think that really helps people understand situational awareness. It's like, from my leg past what my leg can reach is all projectile range. This is actually where we throw everything, and including verbal judo. If I can have a conversation with you and you can't touch me and I can't touch you, we can actually have a conversation. Right. We can argue, we can de-escalate, or we can talk. That's it, right? But that's still me projecting at you. So I can get good at that range, right? I can get good at keeping you at bay. But the moment you cross over into a range of combat that becomes physical, that's the moment that you need to draw the line on whether or not you need to protect yourself. If someone's close enough to touch you and you're close enough to touch them, like you see the old bravado where guys are bumping chests in the bar or whatever, that's not de-escalation. No. You are in a fight right now. Like, whether a punch has been thrown or not, you're in a fight. The only difference is who's going to get one off first, who's going to steal who's going to be able to. De-escalation does not happen face to face. It happens a person or two away from you. Yeah. And so I think that a lot of people think they can de-escalate fights like right when they're in someone's face, which you might be able to, but you're rolling dice.
Oh, yeah. No, that's way too late for that.
Yeah, I've told my son, who's 22, I'm like, look, dude, taking steps backwards, if somebody's taking a step forward, is a great way to show everybody I am not the one wanting this confrontation. Moving back, hands up, like, hey, step back until you can't. And I'll say this, and it's a tip for my daughter if she's listening, and she knows she gets tired of me saying it, but I think it's for all women, especially when you get in a car in a parking lot, especially now, don't sit there and answer messages on your phone. Don't sit there with your head down. Get in the car and leave. If my daughter's listening, she's going to giggle because I tell her, seriously, she gets off work and I meet her every night when she gets off work because she works downtown. But I've watched her. She'll get in the car and I'm watching her. She'll get on her phone and she'll start answering it. She's in a dark parking lot. And I'm like, girl, that is not, people are watching you and they're like, she's not paying attention and her car's running.
Man,
y'all
I
do you
had
know a
a
guy named BJ Baldwin?
Uh-uh.
So BJ Baldwin is like a cross country racer. He's like one of the best in the world. And I got an opportunity to talk with him over online because he follows the page, and we had talked for years, and I finally got to meet him. And then he told me the story about what happened to him, and it was astonishing. So he's a two-way guy, right? He has a firearm on him all the time. He can conceal carries. And him and his wife, after some event, were in separate cars, and they were going through a drive-through to go get some food before they went back to their house. Well, when they pulled up to the drive-through, I guess the people inside the restaurant said, "Hey guys, we're going to need you to pull up off to the side here because our food isn't ready," which is something that a lot of restaurants do. Fast food, if they're not ready, they'll just have you pull off to the side and they'll get it to you. Well, when they pulled off to the side, it was dark at night that night, and one of the lights were broken, like the parking lot lights. So it was really dark in the area. And he's sitting on his phone and he's playing on his phone. And then all of a sudden he thought he heard his name whispered. And so he pops his head up and he looks around, and his wife has her hands, she's out of her car already, and has her hands on the hood of his car and looks terrified and is looking over his shoulder. Well, as soon as he goes to turn, there were two gentlemen in that parking lot, and he turned just enough time to see one of the gentlemen pull a firearm, point the gun in his face right as he was walking past. His window was down still from making the order, points the gun in his face and says, "What's up?" And then just keeps walking towards the guy's wife. And he was like, "Oh shit, like this is happening. This is going down right now." So he pulls his firearm, he draws, and he starts taking shots right through the windshield. Pow, pow, right? Gets about 2 or 3, I think, off before he winds up getting out of the car. And he's in a gunfight right now. That guy's firing rounds back. He's running. His friend, I guess, did not have a firearm because he wasn't shooting back. And they're at this parking lot having this gunfight. He said he looked over to the right and he saw what he thought was a full-size dumpster, and he went to go hide behind the dumpster, and he starts taking shots back. He winds up killing the guy in that parking lot. He went to go take a shot. The guy ducked in a funny way. Bullet goes through his mouth and out the back of the skull, and he killed this guy. But that situation, like you're saying, could have been so much different had he not been fucking around on his phone, not paying attention to what was going on. Now, you never know when some stuff like that's going to happen.
Right.
But, this is like something that was been documented, that this dude had to defend himself in that situation. And, going back to what we were talking about before about real self-defense, like if he had all this like martial arts training in one way or another, that wouldn't have saved his life right then.
No, 0%. Man, I had a situation last week. I'm in Dallas. It's late. My son left something in the car, and it was a hotel parking lot. We go getting it out of the car. I'm about to get out of the car, and this guy pops out of nowhere in front of my truck, and he's looking at me, and he's like kind of leaning his head, trying to look inside my truck windows. And immediately, like, the spidey sense starts going off. I'm looking, my kid's already hopped out of the car. He's 7. The guy ducks behind another truck. I get out. I'm like looking for him, trying to get behind the truck, get my hand on my kid, and this dude pops out 5 feet in front of me at the end of my truck. And I immediately, like, appendix scary, immediately hand on the gun. I'm like kind of trying to cover my kid up. And the guy gave me a weird look, and I think he realized like that maybe I wasn't as soft a target as he thought. And I think he thought better of it and left. But it was hairy, man. Like, it was hairy. And it's like I've spent my whole life, doing martial arts training and all that kind of stuff. And in that moment, like, all of that was out the window. It was, I have to protect my kids, survive. And I was 100% committed to doing, like, it wasn't going to be like, we weren't going to have a jiu-jitsu fight at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, and it was, I don't know, man. You train and you want to have these tools to be able to protect yourself, and you hope you never have to use them, but it happens, I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it's scary out there, man. I just hope that when people are trying to learn martial arts, right, and they want to learn self-defense in general, not just martial arts, but they really want to learn how to protect themselves, that they kind of toss aside some preconceived notions of what it is and what it's not. I know that there are a lot of people out there, and I have a saying, I don't know if I'm the only person who said this, but this is just a saying I have, is that everybody's anti-gun until they need one.
Yep.
So like, I'm a person who I truly in my heart wish they did not exist. I think it's a terrible tool. It kills people, right? But I'm not going to be naive and stupid enough to think that something can ever be uninvented. It's invented.
Right.
So whether you like it or not, or whether
It's
you
here.
enjoy firearms or not, you might want to learn how to fucking use one, because there might be a time where you need to, and you don't want to be a danger to other people because you're untrained with a firearm.
It's like leg locks in a jiu-jitsu match. It's here. It's here now.
I'll tell you one of my favorite quotes. Then we're going to play a game of Would You Rather, and we'll let everybody go. One of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's the student asked I think it was the karate or jiu-jitsu teacher or whatever it is. Both you guys will be able to correct me. But why do you train? And so I'm trying to remember the quote, but it's, I would rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Yeah. Yep. So in other words, I would rather know how to do these things and never need them than need them and never not know how to do them. So
yeah, I've always called myself a violent pacifist.
Yep.
It's like 9 times out of 10, I don't want to fight anybody, but don't think for a second that I haven't trained and understand violence.
Right. Yeah, if you want to fight me, 2 o'clock in the morning, come through the front door. We'll see what we can do. You know, at that point, that's all I really at this point, or mess with family, I guess. Hey, if you're okay with it, let's play a quick game of Would You Rather and have some fun.
Sure.
All right, and Jason, I've played this with you in the past, so I may ex-nay and not include you in some of these. Yeah. But I think I'm going to get you. No, I'm going to get you on this first one though. Favorite movie that is either about martial arts,
Karate Kid. It's not even close.
Nobody's finished the damn question yet, sir.
I've watched that movie 300 times.
Did you have the?
I've had like 6 of them, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Rob, do you have a favorite movie about martial arts, karate, jiu-jitsu?
I do, actually. It's Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon.
Yes.
It is the corniest martial arts movie ever. But there are some really good nuggets in that movie. For instance, a lot of people don't know it, but the bad guy from that movie, Shonuff, was actually in The Heat of the Night. I loved The Heat of the Night.
Who's the baddest mofo down around this town? I mean, Shonuff.
Ernie Reyes Jr. Ernie Reyes Jr. is a legendary martial artist. He was the pizza boy on the Ninja Turtles. He was actually one of the Ninja Turtles. He was a Muay Thai fighter. He was in the Rundown. Ernie Reyes Jr. is a legend in martial arts, and he was like a 8-year-old kid, if that, in this movie. Yeah, I love that movie, and
plus it had vanity. Plus it had vanity. It had vanity in it. She was beautiful and she was gorgeous. I thought I like Lone Wolf McQuade. That's an old one. If anybody wants to go back and see another cheesy movie with Chuck Norris. All right. Here's the, we'll get into the real part of it now. There we go. If you could only eat one for the rest of your life, you eating pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Okay, good.
Because I like chicken and waffles. I've never had chicken and pancakes. It just doesn't sound right. Waffles all day.
Yeah, plus waffles have those little squares that capture the butter and the syrup. You can only have one the rest of your life. French fried tater tots or onion rings?
French fried tater tots.
French fries, tater tots, or onion rings? Which one of those?
Tater tots or onion rings. Okay. Dude, I think onion rings, because I've seen people do a lot with onion rings, man. Onion rings I've had a lot of different places and prepared a lot of different ways. And I'd be all about that. Tater tots, you pretty much know what you're going to get. There's no variety.
All right. You can only go on one vacation spot for the rest of your life. Every time you go on vacation, beach or mountains?
Beach all day. But I have a thing, man. Like, I have this thing with my ears. I was born with a cleft palate, so I had a lot of surgeries as a kid.
Right.
And it affects your ear, nose, and throat. And one of the bad things that it affects my ear is pressure. Hurts extremely bad. And I love the mountains. I think they're beautiful, but the depressurizing usually takes me like 2 or 3 days, whereas most people's ears pop. I'm just in pain with a headache for like 2 or 3 days while it takes me to decompress. I was just in the mountains, man. Like our company, one of the company that sponsors me, Killcliff. It was like me, Ryan Bader, Joe Benavidez, Robbie Lawler, and then like a whole bunch of Navy SEALs, and they took us up into the mountains. Yeah, where was that? I have like a little thing here. Jackson Hole.
Oh yeah.
So we were in Jackson Hole, and man, we were riding ATVs and doing all kinds of shit, but it was a good time. But the hard part for me was like, it took me a day to like decompress. So
Jason, aren't you?
I got a question.
Go ahead.
I'm interrupting your segment. We're just adding. This is not would you rather, but who is going to win? Robbie Lawler versus Nick Diaz too. Who's going to win that?
Dude, first of all, Robbie Lawler has, if you ever look up the top 10 MMA fights of all time, Robbie Lawler has 3 of the top 10. Robbie Lawler is one of those dudes where you can hit him with a fucking 2x4 like 18 times.
It's crazy.
He's actually super nice guy. He's really, really nice dude. But in the ring, he's a savage, man. So I would no matter what, I'm going to root for my homie. I'm gonna root for Robbie Lawler, but also I'm gonna root for the fact that he's just such a tough as nails dude.
Yeah.
Like you could shoot the dude and you'd be like, why is he still coming? And then like give up.
I'm so excited about that. Like as an
It'll be a
old
banger.
school, I'm so excited about it. I want Robbie to win in dramatic fashion. I want a trilogy.
Well, me and you talked about this last time, Jason. The Diaz brothers, they're just, and you don't have to like them. I don't care if people like them, but
Their
as far
persona,
as tough, dude, they are tough.
their
as freaking
persona
nails.
is like one of the most
man.
marketable
God.
personas in the sport.
I think that what they have that everybody else doesn't quite get, and probably why they're more successful than a lot of dudes, especially at this end stage of their fighting career, is they're uniquely themselves.
Yeah, right.
Always.
Right.
They're never trying to be somebody they're not. They're not trying to cater to anybody's feelings. They just want to be themselves. And I think that a lot of fighters, like if you look at like a guy like Colby
Covington. Colby's an act.
He's putting on a persona
Right.
because he thinks that that's what people want rather than just be yourself.
Well, I think he thinks it's what people don't want is what it
No,
is.
he's trying to play a heel. Yeah,
Yeah.
bad guy.
Yeah, he's trying to be the bad guy.
That'll only get you so far. Like I think you can play the heel
Hey, but
as
he
long
was
as you're winning.
irrelevant. He was irrelevant until
Yes.
once he put that persona on, all of a sudden, man, everybody hates him. He should be kicked out, and now he's getting title fights. You know, it's crazy.
Well, like look at Clay Guida. Clay Guida, everybody loves that dude,
Yep.
but like they like him because he's him.
Right.
I think that the world is so short on people who are uniquely themselves that they all are trying to find something. Like just speaking of martial arts, by the way, just for a second, where are the personalities? Will we ever have another Bruce Lee in terms of like personality? Will you ever have another Muhammad Ali? Or are we always going to get caricatures? Are we going to get people who saw them and now are being their versions of them rather than being their own versions of themselves?
I think Conor McGregor is the most unique personality in the history of combat. I love him. I love him. I'm a massive fanboy. I know that's like so anti-popular.
If McGregor really is that and he's not playing an act, he's a dick. Like, just to be honest.
Well,
he punched
so
an
is
old
Musashi,
man.
right?
Well, yeah, I said that. He's like, Musashi's like my favorite dude.
Right.
Yeah, I think he was a dick.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But like, McGregor punched an old dude at a bar because he didn't want to drink,
No, because he didn't want his drink.
His drink.
This is my drink.
Get it right.
You're gonna take a sip. You're getting cracked.
But see, I look back
all I
on
gotta
it.
say is that old man won that fight.
That persona is the I literally just get to do whatever I want. Nobody can stop me persona. And I think everybody secretly they want some level of that.
But look
why he blew up.
But look at Mike Tyson, same way. I mean, Mike wasn't trying to be Muhammad Ali. He was his. I mean, he was a thug when Customato found him.
I forgot about Mike.
And he was
I like
thug
Mike.
when he went to prison.
Yes.
Well, Mike, the beautiful thing about Mike Tyson, I think that he shows that everybody gets a second chance.
Yes.
And when you see like all the shit that Mike Tyson went through when he was younger, like looking back at it, like at the time, you just look at Mike Tyson and think he's a piece of shit.
Right. And then
Later
you hear
on, you
all
find
these
out-
things and find the context behind it.
Yeah, he's getting taken advantage of financially. You know, he already was coming from the streets. He was already a thug. His one mentor, the one person who actually genuinely gave a fuck about him, dies right when he gets the title. Like, it's a sad story, to be honest.
It's very sad.
But watch how he's. But if you listen to him talk now,
I love watching him now.
Me too.
I'll be honest with you though. Every time I watch an interview with him, I just watched him do one with the guy who was in the mafia, went to prison. I can't remember his name, but he's very famous. And he does, if you go to YouTube and look up ex-mafia watches gangster movies and gives his take on it. He's he is a legit guy, but he interviewed him. Mike Tyson interviewed him on his podcast. And I keep waiting for Mike to get pissed off because people now actually can have real conversations. You remember for years, you couldn't have a real conversation with Mike Tyson because everybody was scared they were going to say something and he was going to flip.
Yes.
Now people are talking to him like a real guy going, I kind of bullshit on that, Mike. You can't do that. And I keep waiting like, Mike's
Me
on a
too.
snap. Mike's
Me
on a
too.
snap. But he's
That's
like,
like
I
the
see what you're
difference
saying.
between-
I understand. That's very
A few
thoughtful.
years back, Mike Tyson was going on like a press tour because he started his one-man show. And if you've never seen Mike Tyson's one-man show,
it's amazing.
it is really good.
Yeah.
I suggest anybody who's not seen Mike Tyson's one-man show, you should definitely see it because there's a lot of good insight into him, but also his life and life in general for anyone. But when he was doing this press tour, he showed up to like a daily show, like a local news spot. And he shows up and he sits down, and I think he's got like maybe his manager or his handler or somebody's there with him doing the interview with him. And then out of nowhere, like right when the interview starts, the guy who's the reporter asks him about the rape allegations from like 30 years ago. And Mike was like,
I saw that interview.
What does that have to do with this right now? He goes, you're a piece of shit. And Mike was about to beat this dude down. I was there's still some old Mike in there.
Yeah.
He actually pointed at him.
He snapped on Rogan. Not snapped, but he told Rogan like something like, that's not funny. And Joe's like,
well, so we were talking about personas and people that are coming back. I remember and then we're going to let you go, Rob, because you've been super gracious with your time. But
yeah, thank you.
I started watching.
It's been a blast.
I started watching the UFC when and back when, I hate to say that, it was before, so it wasn't UFC. I started watching this kind of stuff when you had Tank Abbott and Butterbean and those guys that were just tough as nails dudes. And then you started seeing these fights between those guys and these guys that were doing jiu-jitsu. And you were watching them going, well, man, they're getting just their asses handed to them. Then it morphed into the UFC. And then the heyday for me, because of my time tree, I could watch more of it and I just more relevant. These are the Matt Hughes and the Chuck Liddells. And that was my era when I watched it. BJ Penn. Now, I don't know what happened. It went away for a while, but the last year and a half, at least for me, I'm a casual fan, right? The last year and a half, I've started paying more attention to it. And I don't know if it's because they're bringing some of those old names back. I think BJ Penn fought a couple years ago, and you had George St. Pierre come back in a while back. But I'm starting now, and I think it may be because, Jason, I'm talking to you more. I'm starting to watch and follow it a little bit more. And just the level of competition that I'm seeing now since I was gone for so long versus what it was is
very
just
elevated.
It's
very elevated.
I mean,
it really is.
I'm amazed.
Now you have kids that have, since they're 7, they were doing jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and boxing and wrestling. And it's just like, it's
more overall
really,
just rounded.
It's becoming like one discipline, all of it together.
Yeah, I think people have their own styles still in a way. I think you still see stylists, but I think what's happening more is people are at that level are a lot less disrespectful towards the arts, and they're a lot more disrespectful towards the people. Right. Where back in the day, they were super respectful to the people, but the arts they were taking a shit on.
But I think so, like, if you're really competitive today, though, you're at American Top Team, or you're at AKA, or you're in Dagestan, or where you're with other elite guys, and you're all training everything. Not to say that you might not have some wrestling bias or some, but wouldn't you agree with that? That
well, I mean, even like Gilbert Burns, for instance, who's in Sanford MMA. So Sanford MMA has Gilbert's
Burns, an anomaly. He's a little bit of an anomaly, though.
Rory McDonald, but even Gilbert, for instance, because he
very high level
fighting Stephen Thompson.
Right.
Which is a hard fight for me to watch because they're both friends. But when he was going to be fighting Stephen Thompson, he brought in Raymond Daniels for his training camp because he knew that he needed to learn the sport karate style. So, like I said before, what was happening before was people were shitting on the styles, but they were super respectful to the people, right? They'd knock a dude out and handshake and all that. But now people are being disrespectful to each other outside of the ring, like talking shit more because that's what sells more tickets, it seems.
Yep.
But when it comes to the style, they're way more respectful. A lot more guys are doing karate style footwork or taekwondo style footwork because they're seeing how effective it is outside of the pocket and how to enter. A lot more guys are using lead leg kicks, which wasn't a thing for the longest time because so many guys were switch kicking because they were Muay Thai guys. And it's rare in Muay Thai for you to throw anything lead leg. You always switch kick.
Right.
And so, but now like people are watching and they're saying, oh, well, the timing is different if I just rotate and I use my lead leg. And so you're seeing all this, but I think that's the beauty of the evolution. And so, yeah, like you're super correct, though. A lot of guys now are aligning themselves with camps because you need good training partners. Right. And you're getting this beautiful like sauce. You're almost, not yet, I don't think.
It's very
almost spot the differences in the camps through
Right.
styles.
I agree with that. And I think it's very, very difficult though to get elite at anything in a vacuum. And so like if you want to play baseball in the major leagues, you got to be playing like, you know, those guys are all practicing together and playing together on a daily basis, right? And it's the same thing with wrestling in college. You know, so like we had well, that's another story. We won't go there, but yeah, cool stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hey,
sure.
Rob, man, you've been super grateful with your time. Just know that as you go about your day and you keep posting stuff, there's at least 2 guys out there on top of the other tens of thousands that are fanboys that'll be checking your stuff and watching it, man.
You've got 2
Well,
fanboys
it,
that now you had an hour with. So
yeah.
Well, we've had almost 2 hours. With
Yeah,
it.
it's been a minute.
Right, 2 hours. There you go.
But yeah, man, I
It
appreciate
felt
the
like 10
conversation, man.
minutes.
And that again, like a little closing is like it's the whole reason I do what I do. Like I get, you know, I did say earlier I get a lot of death threats, right? But for every death threat, I'm getting hundreds, if not thousands, of people who were saying they appreciate what I put out. I've had people tell me, "Yo, I'm really grateful because I looked at your page before training martial arts and it helped guide me to where I wanted to be."
Yeah.
Guys telling me that they left their instructors because they found out that their instructors, what they were teaching was hot garbage based off of not being, like you said, in a vacuum, having this ability to see that there is garbage and what garbage is. And so, yeah, that's cool, man. I just appreciate that anyone gives 2 shits about who I am because I don't think I'm that important.
Well, if you watch this and you're listening at the very end and you just tuned in, just know this. You don't have to like MMA or UFC or fighting or anything. If you like good content and you want to go down a rabbit hole, go check out the McDojoLife on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. And trust me, you'll do what I did. You'll wake up in 3 hours to go by, 2 o'clock in the morning. You'll be like, well, shit, I got to get up in the morning. So thank you, dude. We appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you guys.
It was a blast, bud.
See you, everybody. Y'all have a good one.